Valiant Thor look a lot like Ricky Ricardo? That's what I've always never quite understood. I mean, has anybody ever figured out who that dude actually is, who's supposedly Valiant Thor?
So are you suggesting maybe that Desi Arnaz Jr. and Lucy Arnaz are maybe hybrids, sort of a hybrid
I
program?
I am suggesting that. Yes.
Yeah.
I I thought it was self-evident.
Well, they had one gray there right on the staff. That was William Frawley.
That's true. And when, by the way, every film I've ever seen William Frawley in, he looks exactly the same. Like even if it was 30 years before I Love
Yeah.
Lucy, he looks exactly the way he does in I Love Lucy. So I think maybe he's some sort of like reverse vampire or something.
Well, whoever worked with him always said that he was less than human.
Is that true?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He was, man, hyper racist. He was a
Oh,
horrible
really?
human being. Yeah. And everybody hated him. And he had this long, long feud with Vivian Vance. And so later, when he was one of the two Uncle Charlies there on My Three Sons, he would always kiss up to those kids and be Mr. Nice Guy to them, but he would always just badmouth Vivian Vance all the time. Like Chip's going to really care about that.
I just oddly enough, because usually William Frawley does not come up in my general conversation.
Really? And what
But
about a connection to Valiant Thor? Does that usually come up? But
well, certainly only through the fact that Valiant Thor does indeed look like Ricky Ricardo. But at the moment, I'm writing something that's inspired by 1930s, 1940s cinema. So I had to go back and watch a lot of old Charlie Chaplin films. So
yeah,
I was rewatching Manger Verdoux, in which Charlie Chaplin plays essentially a serial killer who is killing all these elderly women for their money. And who pops up at the end of the movie? William Frawley.
mm.
Good old Fred Mertz pops up at the end of this Charlie Chaplin film. So that was just the other night. So William Frawley was on my mind, and then you bring up William Frawley.
It's
Very
funny.
strange.
He's almost like the Mothman. He just shows up whenever there's widespread death.
Yes, it's true. People see William Frawley, and then like a bridge will collapse a few days
Right,
later. He is
right.
an omen of imminent death, I think.
Or
William Frawley.
just seems skulking around
Makes
like
makes perfect
Nosferatu.
sense to me. I don't
Right.
know.
I could see William Frawley being a kind of like a Bob Dobbs kind of icon. Like we should build a whole like Church of the Subgenius around William Frawley.
All right. So, welcome back to Conspirinormal. Um, we're here with a couple of our favorite guests that we've paired up many times before. And that's Robert Guffey and Dr. Future. And I just kind of wanted to just you know, a few months ago, I think at the beginning, like around about like when did it come out, Mike? I think at the beginning of the year, February, I think was the first time
What's the
the
it?
pod
I don't
the
know if anybody
podcast
knows what I'm talking about.
the
Uh,
podcast, yeah,
the
about the Georgia Guidestones,
Yeah, what the
the
Atlanta
Atlanta,
Journal-Constitution did.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it was
right,
somewhere around then, I think. Yeah,
yeah.
February, March, I can't remember.
So I just wanted to kind of give something I've been wanting to do is to give Robert Guffey a chance to talk to Dr. Future about this about his research with the Georgia Guidestones. And Robert, you've actually listened to the entire thing, which
Yes,
I've listened.
am
I
I
think
the
I've not listened to the last two episodes. I think Sergio, you listened to a couple of the episodes. So it's been a minute since I've
Yeah.
listened to it as well.
And I
right?
confess, I got to the point where they decided to sneak in and buy some fireworks, and they got all giggly, and it got to be very Gen Z or whatever, and I lost interest, and I haven't heard anything since then. So you'll have to fill me in, Robert, on the
Okay, I
revelations
can
that
do
you
that.
had.
I took I kind of stream of consciousness notes on it, and so some of these are observations, some questions, some serious, some less so. But I am curious, did you meet Tyler McBrien, the host, or did someone else interview you for your episode?
Well, um, hello to everybody out there in Conspirinormal world. It's an honor to be on this show, and it's funny it's called Conspirinormal because I think the people affiliated with this show are now the official normal people in my book. So it's the appropriate name here. So I'm glad to be here. Now,
Yeah.
regarding your question, Robert, my recollection, I do not remember him being part of the interview. Megan Nadolny, who was the behind the scenes producer, was the main one that I remember being part of it. And either that, I mean, there was somebody with her. It was majority her. Now, if I missed something with him, it's been a while, but I don't think it was him because when I heard him talking, it's like I don't remember talking to him because they just excise these little clips out of me, like little half sentences, and um, some of the assertions he made about what I was intimating or whatever, I don't remember the examples unless they come up, but some of them just weren't really what I was trying to say or emphasize. And I'm not saying there was of any diabolical purpose or, people get carried away with wanting to make a point and they'll sort of conform things into that, what that premise is. So I'm not insinuating anything malicious or anything, but some of the points where I don't think he quite got some of it. I actually think the CNN person who was on there probably got the gist of it a little bit better. But I'm going on a little vague memory. I just sort of moved on, Robert.
Yeah. Did they come to your house to interview you, or was it like over Zoom or?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, they have the kind of budgets that the rest of us don't have, even for podcast. You wouldn't think
Yeah.
that podcast should be that complicated, but they hired somebody out of Nashville that was the producer for, I guess, podcast and other things for he was the guy that used to be part of the Southern Baptist Religious Liberty Convention, and then he went rogue and went anti-Trump. His name escapes me. Sort of a prestigious guy in the Southern Baptist, but anyway, he's sort of an outsider voice now, but still an insider in a way. And wherever he gets his money from, she was a professional that did it for him, and they hired her to come to my house because I wouldn't know how to push a button, to be able to record anything and get the audio and the sound right. But so anyway, it sort of got, and they were nice. Everybody was nice, but I could see that, hey, this is operating a little different environment than what all of us are used to. This is a little bit more NPR, the less our circles. So yeah, my long answer to what you said is they hired somebody that was just a technician to get the super pristine audio, and then it was a remote connection.
Are you
It is
familiar,
interesting.
Robert? Are you familiar with that journalist or something?
No, I was just curious if the host, Tyler McBrien, was the one actually doing the footwork, or if he was sort of just operating as the host. And it seems like maybe that's
Yeah.
I
what
feel
was
Yeah,
more
going
of the
on.
latter.
that's how it seems like these things are usually set up by these
Right.
by these like newspapers. I've listened to a lot of those same type of podcasts that usually have some kind of newspaper or magazine that is supporting them, and it's usually very much like that. It's like you have a host, but then you have
They're
I mean they have
employing.
it's just an audio documentary really is
He
what
was
they're
he was
making.
at least the part like my part. He was almost really like a later editor, long after the stuff was produced, than it was
That's
like
weird.
interacting with me. You know,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
Right.
what I
that was
remember. Now, my memory might be wrong, but that's when I was listening to that, I'm thinking, I don't remember talking to him, and I don't think he's understanding the point I was making. So, there's degrees of separation when you weren't there at the
yeah,
incident when it was, and they already sort of have a storyline that they
right.
want to tell, and so they'll excise. And really, I don't know if I had complete sentences that I remember, maybe a few in the narrative, but um, I just listened to it once, and it's been a long time. So, but it looked like it was just sort of little snippets. Now, the closest experience I had to that was when I used to make feature-length films. Back in the 80s, I was like one of the first people to do shot on video stuff when camcorders first came out. and I was filming the penultimate scene of my post-apocalyptic movie, What Now? And I think it was like around
Classic.
1990. Yeah. And the scene, we had been kidnapped, my friend and I, who were started by a militia group after society had broken down, and we were being forced and impressed to attack this drug lord's estate. And I was somehow able to secure the use of the Talbot estate in Dayton, which was where they invented the nuclear detonator. And it was very much a Gilded Age kind of place with this. It's very much like I mean, that's true. It's really Talbot State is part of our history about where they invented the nuclear detonator. And this house was such a big mansion. It had a house built inside of a house, and it had this really fancy pool in the back with these big statues and all this other kind of stuff. It looked like maybe what you would think of the Epstein Mansion or something, and so I had all these people in these, on like $100 budget in these militia outfits, and we had fake gun shooting. And NBC Eyewitness Video, which was a popular TV show on Saturday nights, had found out about my movies. And that's why they had sent me a contract. My little production company was called Pant Load Productions. And I have a contract between the NBC television network and Pant Load Productions for NBC to air Nightmare on Neptune, which is my first movie. And they got all this stuff spooled up for a big expose on this new thing coming out of independent made movies. And so they decided to come on the set for this big action scene with lots and lots of extras and violence and shooting and stuff, and lots of people that I'm trying to manage. And so in between the breaks, they would set me down and a few of the main stars and talk about how this whole thing about independent filmmaking came and how did it come about and is it the future and blah, blah, blah. And they would ask you that and you would give them an honest answer, try to make it interesting, a little pizzazz. And they'd say, well, no, that's not really what we want you to say. Would you say this? Would you say it this way? And then they'd keep doing it until you said something that fit what they already had as the narrative before the interviews ever began. And, back in like 1990, 91, when that's happening, the light bulb came on me. It's like, okay, this is a lot of what I'm watching on TV. The news, okay? And this is supposed to be reality TV. This was reality TV / news. So this wasn't a drama. And it was just different things about where video was starting to impact society. But I realized that they were going to keep recording it until they packaged it the way they want. And it wasn't quite that severe in this incident, but there was a little bit of that. And when I heard it edited at the end, I could tell very much so that they had more of a newfangled, more mod way of, a little bit of that cynical tongue-in-cheek about all this. And where some of my quotes fit it, so be it. Some of his summaries of like the rationale on us talking to the banker and other kind of stuff really weren't based on the whole story. And I think could have made me look in a worse light because he did not know that, like the banker, for example, I had followed up with him, and we had already gotten approval on camera to film anything that was in the camera, anything that was on there, and we said that on there, and went and talked to him later, and I said, look, we saw a name and stuff in there, we just want to let you know, if that's okay or whatever. And he says, yeah, that's fine. He says, you just weren't supposed to ask me his name. You weren't supposed to ask me R.C. Christian's name, and we didn't. And he says, and you didn't. Right. So he wanted to be faithful to his oath, but I really think in an indirect way at his elderly age, he felt like it was time for that to get out. And that was an indirect way that
he was fine if you just inadvertently saw this name, then he was fine with that.
I think his conscience was okay.
And it's like, and that's one of the things that, like, you've had that kind of accusation leveled at you and Chris Pantera that, like, you tricked him, but you really didn't. It really wasn't a trick.
Why would he have opened that up in the first place?
Yeah, right. Exactly. He was fine with showing you some real confidential correspondence.
In case anybody doesn't know, Dr. Future, Dr. Michael Bennett is the one who cracked the mystery of the Guidestones whilst making a documentary, took his butt down there to Elberton, Georgia, and got footage of the banker who assisted the man building the Guidestones to open up a, what was it, a chest or just like a banker's box or
It was
something?
an
The
IBM
computer
computer
box.
case.
Computer box.
IBM
Computer
computer
case.
case. And it was mentioned in some background info, like an LA Times article or maybe even the CNN
I think it
one.
was Wired. Wasn't
It
it
was just
Wired?
rumors that it existed.
Yeah.
And
Wasn't it
even
Wired magazine, Mike? That
it could have been, it was one of
yeah.
those,
Yeah.
but it was a dead end for him and they couldn't verify that it existed. And he told us in the interview later that he told them he'd burned all the letters, but he hadn't. So he had already told them a fib already that they were gone. And we just asked him, did it exist? Was there any truth to it? And he said, yeah, and I got it out in the shed. And he just
So
volunteered that out. And so that we just said, hey, can we go see it? And everything we requested, we asked for him beforehand, and he was cool with it.
Tyler McBride says at one point about your method of extracting information from Wyatt Martin, quote, it feels a little manipulative, unquote, is what he said. So you don't feel it was manipulative?
Well, Wyatt
Because
Martin didn't.
yeah, yeah, because I've seen the documentary and it didn't feel to me like um you were twisting his arm. It wasn't like the scene in All the President's Men when Dustin Hoffman sticks his foot in the door.
Yeah,
Potential
yeah,
way. It's not like you were strong arming this guy.
I,
You just said, "Can I see it?" And then he said, "Sure."
And you
yeah,
guys have a good cadence, and he's not unintelligent, and he knew what was going on.
right.
So if anything, it was kind of like a, you know, it was a little dance, and like you said, he probably intended to, maybe.
Well, part of it. And there was someone who tried to get themselves into a part of what we were doing and was over sort of my objection. And then they went rogue and they wanted to take our discovery that unfortunately Chris had revealed to the person. And then they wanted to run with it. And when they were told to wait until the documentary came out, then they went on a destruction tour of both of us. And that's what started some of those rumors about that. But the real story is that some of those people that came before Chris and I were they were like bulls in the china shop with Wyatt Martin.
Mhm.
Okay, they didn't talk about things from a spiritual standpoint. They didn't talk about things like, we intentionally and out of respect for Wyatt Martin let him tell his story, including his spiritual convictions. Now, do I agree with what I think were the compromises he made of his faith and then doing things that obviously were a little different than the values that he may have heard in church? Well, to me, the real story of that whole thing, and I wish I could have had the editing privileges, was that it's really a story of America of compromise. I mean, you got two small towns in America of people who claim to have certain values, very religious values, but it's funny how we insinuate ourselves when we want to, all of us want to be important. We want to be self, we want to leave a legacy, and how we can compromise and do it so subtly that our rationale doesn't realize what we have done. And, but when we went to him, we let him tell his story and he treated us completely different. And in fact, he told us about all the other people that talked to him, including some of the ones that had tried to be involved with us. And he said, yeah, they were trying to say this and making this crazy claim and doing this and doing all this stuff. And he didn't respect them. So the irony is that they think we manipulated him when, as far as from his own mouth, he said he respected Chris and I and how we were treating it and doing it. I suspect that's why he felt more comfortable voluntarily adding that extra information because of how the respect we showed him, the fact that we let him take the initiative. We were just curious and we asked. And when I followed up with him, and I told him, I said, we don't want to exploit you. We have certain spiritual reasons why we think it's beneficial for people to know. And there were things he didn't know. He didn't know all this background about these guys. He knew a name. In fact, I didn't even mention the name to him. I didn't even bring it up to him because I thought he didn't want to be confronted like that. But
Yeah.
the the fact is that he told me, he said, no, you all are fine. He says these other people were up to no good that were doing this. He said that was fine what you're doing. And he closed by saying, you go in God's grace.
Well,
Those were
I
his
think
final words.
I think by that time that you guys talked to him, that this was like what, 2010, somewhere around there.
That's when we
I
interviewed him, 2010.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think by that time things have become really sensationalized with the Georgia Guidestones.
Well, it was the
So
30th
all these
anniversary that year.
outrageous claims had been circulating, and that's probably why he just didn't take any of those other people really seriously, because they were
Connected to
probably
foreign
looking for,
buildings. Right.
yeah,
Scientology, Ted Turner, all that. And he mentions this in the interview. He says, yeah, they claim all these kind of things. He says there's nothing, has nothing to do with any of it.
yeah, right. And that's part of the that's part of the thing, is that it's not as sexy as people want it to be,
Right. For
you know. Yeah,
thinking people find it fascinating what did get discovered. To me,
Absolutely.
it's a whole lot more
yeah,
interesting than an
right.
L.
It
Ron
is.
Hubbard,
It is.
Yeah.
because it causes you to reflect about something that's a little deeper going on in
It's
small town
way more,
America
yeah. It's way more insidious in a
in a
lot of ways.
realistic way. Yeah, in
Yeah.
a realistic way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You the letters that you uncovered in Martin's shed, you probably have no way of knowing this, but do you know if those letters still exist in the estate of Wyatt Martin, or do you know what happened to those?
Never found out what they did with that
Yeah,
material. Never found out.
right.
He said in the interview he had thought about writing a book about it, but he said
Yeah.
now I'm too old to do it. I think he mentioned that in the documentary. But
Yes.
um, no, I don't know. I mean, my real legacy is I still have the original drawing plans for the Georgia Guidestones in my safe, including all of the stuff that they were supposed to, put on top of it, and the extra stuff the Atlanta Masons were supposed to add, and the mysterious letter that I think was supposed to be in the time capsule and all that kind of stuff. I still have all that stuff. Um,
Ah,
What is that
so we could.
stuff? Can you give us a summary of what was supposed to be added to it, to the
oh
monument?
yeah, like a pyramid. There was supposed to be a pyramid put on top of that. Oh shoot, what's the stone at the top? The Nomans? Is that the one at the top? It's the flat one on top with its keyed. There was supposed to be a pyramid that went on top of that. There was supposed to be a whole series of stones, sort of like the hinge over there in the UK, that surrounded it. And I'm trying to remember. It was either like one of those was supposed to be for the Atlanta Freemasons, or the pyramid was. It's in the letter, one of his letters.
Were there going to be more like astronomical or astroarchaeological devices? Like, was
That's
our,
what those extra stones were around the perimeter. And I don't remember what extra um, astrological or astronomical measurements they could make with those. But yeah, they were like little graduated ones, almost like you'd have like a little pegs around the sundial kind of thing.
yeah.
But yeah, there was a whole series of them, and other people were supposed to fund that. And this was the starter project to coalesce the rest of it. But I remember
So that.
reading in the letters the Atlanta Freemasons were supposed to pony up part of that.
So does this mean we can rebuild it based on the plans that you have?
Well, yeah, technically, yes.
Yeah,
Technically,
we should
yes.
do.
It
We
it
should
has
do.
everything, and it's all written in just the narrative of R.C. Christian, of the real man, talking to most of that I think was direct to probably Gary Finley, who oversaw the project. Some of that may have been to Wyatt Martin, but the part of the things that were disclosed in all that is a gentleman who had he begins with a C, the real old guy that was on the breathing. Um, Help me here, Adam. It's like a CON. What was the guy who had the construction company that was on
Are you talking about the
air?
richest man in Georgia?
Well, yeah, supposedly, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't remember the name, but
his
I
role,
mean,
I think
yeah.
that was all unique, is what came out in the documentary. Nobody knew this guy had any involvement, but between him and Wyatt Martin and others, they were putting a PR machine together. And they had all sorts of plans for having regular debates there, to have like strange reality conference kind of things every year at the Guidestones.
If only.
And yeah, not as weird as strange realities, but
Yeah.
stuff like that. And yeah, they'd planned to bring like world researchers to debate the merits of the thing, but it was all going to be a money-making thing. The
Yeah.
Chamber of Commerce was tied in, and this was all, it was going to be the new Disney World for Alberton, Georgia. And so, they all saw dollar signs in their eyes putting this together.
I think we should do the Georgia Guidestones Kickstarter. How much do we need to raise?
I would be so proud at my deathbed to know that I helped rebuild the Georgia Guidestones.
Mike, can we put it? Can we put it? Can we put it in your
survivors.
backyard? We put the full
Yeah.
scale replica in your
Well,
backyard. I mean,
well, I did pick this house, because it was on one of the key ley lines of the world, and the navel of the world, according to the Indians here. So I picked the right lot here for my house. So
It is on a major. Just the area in general is on a major
yeah,
line, Dr. Future.
yeah.
It
Oh,
goes from Natchez,
that's
Mississippi to the Serpent Mound. It crosses right through Nashville.
well, that's why I sleep under a pyramid over my bed too, so I get in tune with those vibrations.
If there's not enough room in your backyard, we could just deconstruct your house and replace it with the Guidestones.
Yeah. Well, I
There's
tell you,
always that possibility.
the way I do maintenance on this house, you wouldn't have to do much reconstruction. Just blow on it real
well,
hard.
Robert, would it be possible? I really think that we should make an addition to the Georgia Guidestones revival at Mike's property. It's got to have need to add the phallic throne. So I
Oh
mean, just
yeah.
got
Well, you
to
know
add
what?
that to it.
We could kind of tweak the plans a little bit so it's more like the Conspirinormal Guidestones instead of the Georgia Guidestones, and have our own like 10 guidelines.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't have to have the same 10
Well,
guidelines. We can make up our own.
well,
So,
Never play poker with a man named
let's
Doc or something like that.
let's think about this. The way to do this right, if you do that, is that I need to be the heel and you all are the face, just in kayfabe tradition. And I need to run a ministry to help stop the construction of it and to threaten to dynamite
there
it.
we go. Both sides.
Oh yeah, that's great.
And
Excellent.
the
Yes.
Hegelian dialectic. So, there's no such thing as bad publicity. So what we need to do to really get it publicized is to create a little bit of a holy war between both parties as we build it. And then it's sort of like Animal Farm. We'll be like the pigs meeting with the farmer.
So, I mean, this is something that we've talked about, but I think it's worth reiterating that when you're dealing with the Georgia Guidestones story, and especially with the information that Mike found out, that this is built by essentially right-wing elements that are also eugenicists, which the guy who ends up who is the person that commissions these to be built was a big supporter of David Duke. Then the irony becomes that after these are built, and primarily because of the first commandment, which is the 500 million thing, we don't need to kind of belabor that here, but just like all of a sudden it becomes this, like, all of a sudden it's evil and it's satanic and it needs to be destroyed, and it's
New World Order.
yeah, and it's evangelical Christians that are coming out against it when it was somebody that was on the right wing that built it in the first place, and then it gets destroyed by somebody that's probably right wing. It's an interesting history. So I think that's something to point out, about Georgia Guidestones.
Mike, did R.C. Christian have an outward mainstream Christian denomination?
He was Roman Catholic.
Okay.
Okay. And he was, I think he received full Catholic honors when he died. So, there's a wide berth there in all these places. If you come to Mass, I'm not a Catholic, so I can't speak, but if you come to Mass and you do your bit, they don't get too much into your knickers about what you believe most of the time.
No, no.
I don't, and that's, I can't say that as a Catholic, but that was my observation is that, you kiss the ring and you stay in good terms, you can do what you want. Just don't challenge the system. And he didn't do that. Um, I believe Mr. Merriman, who was the alter ego, it took two to tango for this. I believe he was uh from what I dug up on his ending, I think he was Lutheran, and his family had a long, long history in Minnesota, I believe, of Lutheran Scandinavian connections as part of the history of that area. But I know one thing is sort of weird is that he donated his body for medical experiments.
Okay.
So maybe that was his own contribution to eugenics. I don't know.
But
But
he was. Go ahead, Robert.
Well, I was just speaking of the Hegelian dialectic. It's just fascinating that this Roman Catholic was apparently planning to add some sort of elaborate capstone that had something to do with the Atlanta Freemasons. It's all very
Right.
convoluted.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well,
He was an
you
AMORC
go
member,
around
though.
one direction, you come around on the other side. So
He was an
Right.
AMORC member, right, Mike?
say it again.
He was an AMORC member.
I don't know that. Here's the mystery. That's one of the mysteries that was left with me when I went through the Frank Coggins was the guy I was trying to think of. Coggins Construction. In the wonderfulness of how this played out was that none of those people there in Elberton knew that we had discovered a treasure chest with these letters and that I had seen one name and also an address. They didn't know that started the day after we saw that. So while I was trying to scramble and build whatever minimal footprint that Mr. Kirsten had online of who he was, we're interviewing these people. And so, in my opinion, they were, well, like Wayne Mullinex, the guy who did the foundation and provided the land. They bought the land from Mr. Coggins. He was just playing with us. He was just toying with them. He was toying with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution people. And I warned Megan about that he likes to sort of be coy with you. And, when we interviewed him and I asked about, was there a time capsule down there? And the documentary said, yes. He just smiled and said, yes. Because, he was the one doing the foundation. And I said, was it planned to dig it up one day? Yes. Any kind of hints on when you plan to do it? They ain't going to tell you, and just smiled. And he's fiddling with his Masonic ring. He keeps fiddling and holding it up in there, like he's showing us, And I just think he was having a good time, like a lot of these guys are, just reveling in that they had a mystery, that the city slicker from town had to come, that they didn't know, you know, like the old song Wildwood Flower. They didn't know where the sack of seeds of the Mary Jane was. They sitting on top of them. They had a little laugh at the behalf of the city slicker. Uh, but the creepiest thing was when we went to Frank Coggins to see him, and I swear he looked just like Lynch, or the guy that owned Hustler.
David,
Larry
Larry
Flint.
Flint. Yeah.
Yeah, it looked just like Larry Flint, but he was just like he was poured like Jabba into this wheelchair with this nasal cannula, and he had this nurse, this young thing with this little tiny. She looked like a French maid outfit, only it was a nurse, like maybe this Nurse Goodbody off Hee Haw or something, who's catering to him, and he's got. This is a house like in rural North Georgia. It's got marble everywhere, marble. And you know how you have that fancy column behind you, Adam, there in your thing, which looks like you're out of a picture of a Freemasonic artwork, where they put
Yes.
those symbols
I'm,
on
I'm yet to
pedestals like
I'm
you
yet to
have.
find the appropriate capstone, but yes.
Right. But
Ionic.
Yeah.
you just look like you belong in a Freemasonic picture with emblems on there. But he had those everywhere with these a statue artwork and everything. And it not only did I feel physically cold, but just the whole atmosphere was chilling. And I just kept thinking of Eyes Wide Shut. That was the vibe there. And it could have been just, your imagination gets away and it runs with you. But we're asking him questions because he's a guy that nobody had discovered that was in the middle of getting all this. And when I'm asking him questions, his eyes are looking at Wayne Mullinex. And Wayne Mullinex is over there giving him hand signals. He's doing something weird with his hands while I'm watching him. And then he'll look at that and then he'll give some kind of innocuous, like he's looking to an attorney or something, to answer the committee. So that was like, the real weird vibe about it. But then because they didn't know what else we knew, I guess they thought it was, fair game. And they didn't even know if we were serious documentary people. We could have been just some other Joe Schmo. I mean, they didn't treat us like we had any kind of distinguished nature or anything. And they said, oh, yeah, well, he's got the construction documents over at his office at Coggins Construction. Well, y'all want to see it? Because we were leaving town. We had an interview with the guy who did the artwork of the guy that people were saying looked like R.C. Christian. And we didn't know where the story was going to lead. So Chris wanted to go interview that guy, Italian guy. And so we just had a few minutes. It was like, yeah, sure. So when we go over there and Shirley, whatever her name is, the secretary, she just opens the file cabinet and like, there's R.C. Christian's letters. And there's his letters, telling them how to do it. And, I'm telling Chris saying, we gotta go. I said, this is the most important thing. We don't go until we make, we get all of this. And so he was in such a hurry, I had to put paper clips and ask her to make copies of them and send them. And that's what she did. But it was and then that gets into the A mark, is I think where I got off track here. That mysterious paper, it was all typed in all caps, and it says, to whosoever reads this proceeding, and then it talks about, if you find this time capsule and the contents therein, which something blah 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 will change humanity or change our course of humanity, take this to the Elberton Star. And they gave the telephone number, to take that to them. And, take these things from there, from what you find inside. It sounded like to me, and then it says, also you need to contact the Atlanta chapter of the Rosicrucians, and put AMORC in there, and then it had a phone number. So when I got a copy of that, for grins, I just called the number. And when they answered the phone, it was like Atlanta AMORC. And the guy's name was Bernard West, was the senior guy there. And he originally told me on the phone that he knew Dr. Kirsten, and he also knew the purpose of the Guidestones. And I had to report back to Chris because he was the boss, and he got pretty nervous about all this. Like, I had to really fight really, really, really hard just to get Chris to admit who R.C. Christian was. He was not going to do that. And he was getting very intimidated by everything. And I said, look, we failed if we don't do this. There was a lot of stuff that I wanted in there and an approach that he didn't do. But anyway, he says all this, so I get his approval to go find out, and they wanted to get a copy of the letter. Well, Chris wanted us to meet with him first. Well, then eventually over that time they got cold feet, and they said they wouldn't do it. So were they bluffing? I don't know. I'd love to go there. I saw the building. I saw where they met at. It was some strange looking building painted on the outside. I'd like to go meet with those people and say, does anybody here still know anything? It could be, that was in 1979, 1980. If that was originally part of it, a lot of those people may be dead. Did they keep a paper trail of it? I don't know. The other thing that I have a suspicion was that there was some weird cult couple, and he called himself Onaxis. And this guy would do one strange like cult commune after another. And then he got enamored with the Guidestones and like that it was part of the, Aquarian age of New World. And of course he was a part of it. And he may have been the one who donated all the roses, the red, white, and blue roses they put out there by the thing. But I have a possible suspicion that this guy, Looney Tune, came up with that thing. But why they put it in the construction documents, I asked them. I said, and I asked Shirley, I said, I'll make sure, because I got it in writing, that this paper was part of the construction documents. And she said, yes, put it in writing. I said, do you know how it got there? And she said she didn't know. So that's one of the mysteries. Another thing that didn't end up in the documentary is, if you all remember, when I was interviewing the co-owner of the publishing company that did R.C. Christian's book, and what was it about reason? Anyway, at
A
that
New
place, it
Age
was
of
at,
Reason, something like that.
yeah, yeah. Of all things, it was in Mason City, Iowa. Curiously. And I was standing there where they had like 800 flags flapping. It was almost deafening there, because that's where this guy was willing to meet me. And he had all those flags flapping because it was around Flag Day. And he told me originally that uh that Merriman paid for all of these publications, including all those leather bound ones they sent to members of Congress. He paid for it in gold Krugerrands. And later, when I tried to get them on camera to say it on camera, they got real scared and got cold feet. But just out of the blue, he just, that's not something I would have known to ask. He says, yeah, he says, I found it curious. He paid for all this printing in gold Krugerrands, which is a South African gold
Yes.
coin, which got
Yeah.
very
Right.
popular, I think, with organized crime and stuff.
Yeah.
But they didn't come out. I thought those were like old coins. That was very new then. I don't think they were around much long before that.
Could he have had someone? This is speculation here, but being that, like, he's supporting David Duke,
Yeah.
could he have
Right.
had? Could he have had a interested party that was in South Africa? And we know what's going on in South Africa in the 70s
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
80s.
Or just American networks of white supremacists had
Yeah.
stockpiles of that from dealings with South Africans. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Right.
You know what's strange on the episode, the bonus episode that they posted on July 6th? So it's the most recent episode. They interviewed the professor who translated the Sanskrit inscription on the capstone. So in 1979, they went to this guy and they said, we need this sentence, let these be guidestones to an age of reason. So they needed that translated in Sanskrit. And he said that there's no such word as guidestone in Sanskrit. So he had to, kind of do an approximation. But something he just mentioned in passing, which I never heard anybody say before, is he said that when they approached him back in 1979, not R.C. Christian, but whoever R.C. Christian had spoken to in Elberton to get this done, when they contacted him, he was told the purpose of the Guidestones was to withstand an invasion from outer space. And he just says this kind of like with a straight face, like just kind of casually mentions that. Did you ever come across, did anyone ever say anything like that?
I never, with the people who were actually literally involved with the project, and not the weirdos that came into town, I never saw the outer space one mentioned. If you look in the Common Sense book, it was a nuclear exchange with Russia was the main thing, because that was still a thing at the time. And that was like the big thing that people thought were going to wipe out civilization, was that. And
Cold
so
War
that
was
was the
heating
main
up
bulk of his book.
it was
Common Sense
heating up in
Renewed.
1979 to 80. Yeah.
Yeah, Common Sense Renewed was the book. Yeah, and that's when we were boycotting the Olympics and they invaded
Right.
Afghanistan and
Right.
stuff.
Right.
So no, I never saw the outer space thing ever mentioned as a thing. But did he say which one of the parties were telling him those things?
He does mention the exact name, but it escapes me at the moment. But the professor does mention the name of the man in this bonus episode.
Okay, well, I guess I'll need to go back
I
and
didn't
listen
jot it
to it.
down.
Well, I would
Yeah.
like to hear if there were legitimate revelations in the Revelations episode.
Well, not really. In fact, I thought it was interesting that in episode 2, the episode that features you, Tyler McBrien describes dark clouds over Elberton as, quote, conspiracy fringe DIY, unquote,
Yeah.
which, sounds somewhat derogatory or
Right.
dismissive. But
Right.
this podcast is actually far more speculative than your documentary. I mean, the documentary you did actually found verifiable information, whereas the last episode of this podcast, they essentially come across these two guys, one guy named Kevin and Eric, and they're not using the real names, and they find various suggestions that maybe they had something to do with it. And in fact, the guy that they hone in on is this fellow named Eric. These are the producer's main suspects, and the producer, or rather Tyler, calls this guy Kevin out of the blue and says, "Do you know this guy I'm looking for, Eric blank?" And this guy Kevin immediately says, "Does this have anything to do with him blowing up the Guidestones? He didn't do it." It's like a comedy bit or something, right?
Huh.
It's like if you had anything to do with blowing up the Guidestones and nobody has interviewed you or asked you questions about it for several years, and suddenly out of the blue, a journalist calls you and says, "Hey, do you know this guy Eric?" Why wouldn't you just hang up on that guy? Like, why would they? I mean, this guy continues to talk to them for hours and hours, kind of like throwing out these cryptic sentences. Like at one point, he says, "I know everything that happened to the Guidestones," and Tyler asks him a direct question, and this guy Eric says, "You want to interrogate a terrorist organization, and you expect the answers?" So he's basically like referring to himself as a terrorist organization, and I'm thinking, why is this guy talking at all? Like I thought maybe the guy's just mentally ill. I mean, I got the sense that the dude maybe was just completely unhinged.
He got his 5 minutes of fame. That's what
Yeah,
all these people want. If that's
that's
what
that's
you want me
kind
to
of
be, then that's what I'll be if I can get on camera.
that was kind of the vibe I got from it. So I thought it was just interesting that Dark Clouds over Elperton was conspiracy fringe DIY, and apparently this is, as you say, a professional podcast. But you actually ended up with more verifiable information than they did, and they had a whole team of people, as you said, and a big budget
Lots of money.
behind them.
Yeah.
That's a very good point.
That was one of the notes I wrote down. I call this type of podcast the corporate podcast as opposed to like a real podcast. I consider a real podcast to be like Conspirinormal or The Farm or Erica Luke's show or something like that's an actual podcast.
Yeah.
But when you have the corporate podcast, it always feels vaguely artificial, a little too slick. And the host always has what I call the podcast voice. I don't know how to define this.
Yeah.
I know
Except
exactly what you mean.
That,
I thought the same thing. Exactly.
it's like they
typical
manufacture them in a
educated young
factory.
American male.
Yes, it's a kind of, if you've ever gone to a poetry reading, and the poets will tend to have the poetry voice. It's similar to the podcast voice. I don't know how else to explain it other than that.
Are they trying to emulate like I don't know, what is it, Gen Z? I don't know what's the latest, a version of NPR or something? Because I always detect a little bit of a wryness, a little wink in it, a little bit like how the British are when they do this stuff.
Yeah.
It's
a lot of that.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of why I prefer to call those type of podcasts audio documentaries, because that's really what they are. It's like they really want to make a documentary, but they don't have the budget. So it's just easier to make it into an audio form, but they call it a podcast.
Right.
They may not have an overall storyline structure or theme that the data tells them. They don't have anything substantive enough to put a big framework picture, but they want to have something so they can say they did something. And also, again, they'll come up with a narrative and then try to force fit the information they come across rather than let it tell them what's going on.
From the parts that I listened to most of the episodes. I think there's 4 episodes I listened to. And it seemed to me like it was very much trying to be it was less interested like they covered the origins, and I think they did a fairly decent job covering the origins and having and exposing Mike's work on it. But I felt like the rest of it was really like it was a true crime podcast essentially. It didn't
Yeah,
really go
yeah.
into a lot of that other kind of weird stuff that we're into, but it was just more who done it, who's the person that blew this up, you know.
And there's
Well,
also
this is like
there's an entertainment factor in there. They don't want to get bogged down with too many facts and stuff. And I know I get accused of that all the time. Like exhibit A, exhibit B, here's all this kind of they want to have sort of a short attention span theater. So there's
Yeah,
a lot of background noise, a little people chatting in the background. You know,
Serial format. Yeah.
yeah, like the whole thing when they went to the fireworks thing, I'm going on my memory. That time you could have cut it down to like 2 minutes. Okay, what did you find? But no, they want to have this
right.
entertaining repartee between these young
Yeah.
people who are
Yeah,
being real cute
they made
and
a
coy.
real they made a real like dramatic thing about going into Tractor Supply. Like it was
Yes,
like, a
right.
dramatic, oh my God, there's
We got outside of
yeah.
Atlanta just a
termites
little bit.
in Tractor Supply, and anyone will tell you, which I didn't know this, but I don't, buy plastic explosives. Um, anyone will tell you that like will say that yeah, that stuff is readily available in
Yeah.
those type of stores, and so it's not a surprise,
And you
you know.
could have said that in 3 minutes. We went in there and
Right,
found them. Okay, let's
right.
get on to the facts. No, we got to put some
It's
entertaining
to it's
drama.
to it's to hop up the tension and get.
Well, actually, they don't even underscore the main irony of that entire episode, which is that it's easier for the producers to buy enough explosives to demolish several city blocks than to get the raw footage from the GBI of the
Yeah.
video of the surveillance footage. But Tyler doesn't mention that irony at all, which I thought was a missed opportunity.
Most of
Uh,
us have seen that car, that white car that pulls up or it looks white, when they run off and it drives away. Looks like to me it's like a Japanese car, I'm not sure, but uh if they really knew this guy and he really was the guy, all they would have had to done is go to the DMV and find out what cars were registered in his name, in the last 5 years or something. And you pretty easily could have matched if one of those cars fit what was in the video that we've seen.
I I want to say this about the whole thing about the GBI, and like they made a big deal out of this. They made this huge deal that there's this conspiracy and the GBI isn't interested in finding out who destroyed the Guidestones. Well, number one, nobody got hurt. If someone had gotten killed or someone had gotten hurt, they probably would be more interested. But it's just a destruction of property in a town that was probably glad that it was gone in the first place.
Somewhere.
Because I think, that there were some people there were probably a lot of people in that town that were just like, okay, good, it's gone. Like they talked about possibly like a
Right.
few days after it got destroyed, they talked about rebuilding it, but then that just got dropped real quick, and they were just like, we're done. And so I just think the Georgia Bureau of Investigation probably just really doesn't care. And I don't think that's because it doesn't seem that anyone is like really in a hurry to find out who did it.
did you hear the episode where they discovered that the remnants of the Guidestones were just dumped on that random dude's front porch, the Alton Mercer, and he still has them in his backyard? Did you get that far?
I don't think so. I don't remember that part.
Oh yeah, this guy Alton Mercer contacts them. At first, they think he's pulling their leg. He goes, "Yeah, I've got the Guidestones, what's left of them, in my backyard." So they
Right.
go over there, and he has this huge property, and there's all this granite on there, and he finally takes them over to it and said, "Here it is." And he said just one day he like woke up and they were left at his, on his property. And I was taught, I wonder why they didn't keep them for like the Granite Museum, or unless they felt like they
Yeah.
were cursed objects or that the museum might get blown up if they had
Right.
them there.
Right.
And
Oh,
then this guy, Alton Mercer, who has the remnants, he starts ranting to Tyler about the lizard people and the Guidestones being a portal to the inner Earth and all this stuff. And then Tyler McBride says, quote, Alton will not break character, but he's clearly joking, unquote. And there's absolutely no indication that the guy's joking. If you should listen to it and tell me. It sounds to me like he's completely sincere, but in the narration he goes, "Oh yeah, he was just joking," but it didn't sound to me like the guy was joking at all. And then they do mention that the ATF, the GBI, and the police never came to examine these remnants of the Guidestones. So I guess they're still there in this guy's backyard. They're probably going to end up like buried somewhere in the desert, like that ET game that no one played in the 1980s. I don't
Come
know.
to think of it, I do remember this. I do remember. Yes, I do remember them talking to this guy. Yeah, he ends up with
Yeah,
them in his backyard.
episode 6.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that the journalist Thomas Lake in episode 2, the one that is focused on Dr. Future, it said he at one point Lake says he'd always been curious about the Guidestones, but he didn't know about a Michael or Dark Clouds over Elberton until after the explosion. So if this professional journalist had been listening to Conspirinormal, he would have known about both Michael and the documentary, which I thought was
Okay,
interesting.
so that was the frustrating thing about um trying to get people interested whenever the documentary came out. Like I actually really tried to push it, and I got Mike got on some shows because I was really trying to push, to get the word out on this because I thought it was important. And
Well,
nobody really bit at the time in 2016.
yeah. I mean, it's at one point. Thomas Lake says, "quote." Referring to Herbert Kirsten, how is this not common knowledge about the Guidestones? Surely this would have been reported elsewhere, but I got 0 hits, unquote. And then he talks about how, and that's interesting because I thought the same thing when I saw the documentary. Like, how is it that this is not, at the time it wasn't even included on the Wikipedia page for the Guidestones. I
Well,
think that's since been corrected.
you know
Because
what
it looked too much like a DIY fringe conspiracy video.
Right.
Right.
You could actually see the narrative on the Wikipedia page of people submitting data and then the
Yes, I
response
noticed
of the
that.
editors. And when
Yeah.
somebody said, "Hey, we saw this and these guys figured it out, here's what it is," they immediately dismissed it. They said, "Oh, people are always coming up with crazy ideas. It'll always be it. How could you take any of this seriously?" And the person was persistent. They could say, "No, they've really got smoking gun documents. They got it nailed this time." And they kept just dismissing it for I don't know, maybe a few years. But it was really
It, it,
interesting how they resisted that. They wouldn't even go look at it. They said, "If you look at it, you'll see them right there." And they refused to do it. They said, "Oh, well, there's been too much of this stuff produced."
Do you think that's why Tyler McBride, obviously he names you, but he never names the director of Dark Clouds of Elberton. He just keeps referring to him as the director. He doesn't like say his name.
Well, I don't
I,
think that director would provided any assistance to them, and they never could get him to respond to them.
why do you think that is?
Well, I can only give my speculation, and I don't want to get in any kind of trouble because we had a very acrimonious split. And that's why I don't really promote people to go buy Dark Clouds over Elberton. I always suggest they watch it for free. Um, so,
And it is widely available for free.
and just, you're right. And just that, he's gone down a deeper and deeper well. I pointed out to Adam that some of the newer stuff I've seen that he's doing is, I think, almost a Christian version of sovereign citizen history. And so, in my interpretation of it, so he has no interest in secular, no matter how truth seeker they are, anything that would be a secular thing that would draw more. He would be immediately suspicious of anything like that, even if it's just news. If it's not sort of a controlled um, review group of a certain mindset. That's my that's my speculation based upon who I know, and that's the vibe I got from these guys when they tried to go through him. I think they come through to me out of desperation. because I'm the sad sack enough that's willing to sing like a canary. But the other part is more of a cigar store Indian when it really comes to that. And I just don't think that he feels it serves his agenda to talk to secular people about things.
I see. It's interesting that the
My
your
opinion.
partner, yeah, in your opinion, that the director was directly involved in this revelatory documentary, but it sounds like he completely turned his back on um, gaining any real knowledge from it.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, that is interesting. Have you ever considered writing a book about the Georgia Guidestones?
I slipped up and mentioned that once because there was a whole lot of stuff that didn't come out that I saw just
Yeah,
for posterity's sake, just to preserve it.
yeah.
And I sort of got some veiled threats myself if I did that with the material and you know, is this really my
Oh,
material and can I really yeah. I shouldn't say more. But I got the impression that I was going to cause myself a lot of headaches if I did that. And it wasn't because of who I was implicating. It had nothing to do with that.
right. No, I understand exactly what you're saying. That
Yeah,
shouldn't be a problem at all because
it shouldn't.
it would essentially be a personal narrative about what you experienced
My
taking
experience.
a part in this venture. That's your experience. That's not his experience. you
Correct.
know.
And also what my perspective is on what the significance of it is. And that's where we parted company dramatically. I thought that it would be presented in more like a Werner Herzog way, with minimal commentary and just let the damning statements of the participants speak for themselves. Um, I think that would have said a whole lot more than the heavy-handed approach. But, and I hate to say this, I'm a person of faith, that audience does. But
Yes.
when people cater to that audience of a certain type, of a certain like fundamentalist homeschooler type, they have to put it right on the end of their nose and, sort of lead them by the nose to something. It's certainly not a grown-up way of coming to it. And that's one of the sad admissions I have about the faith community that I keep at a little arm's length, even though I may share the central tenets of their faith, because it's a dumbed down community. And I don't know if, even if he would have understand the points I made. To me, it's a real story about America and about small towns and the secrets they keep. And they wrap themselves in all sorts of self-righteousness of their faith and Americanism and all these other kind of things. Golden age of, Mayberry. But there's compromise and other things that are right underneath it. And that was true of Alberton and in some ways true of in Iowa.
Yeah.
And these guys are just exhibit A of the complexity of America, the Disney-fied fantasy versus the reality.
Yes, the story would be about, I mean, not only is it about America in microcosm, it's also a detective story, but it's
Yeah.
also about the vast gap in certain communities between those who are committed to a false narrative in the face of evidence to the contrary. Um, and that's a fascinating story because you've got like three different threads going through there.
And
Um,
also how they can co-opt people of an extremist view can co-opt God-fearing people with very little effort to being pawns in their agenda. Now, I know in our political environment of the last, 10, 11 years, it's impossible that would happen, that extremists could co-opt God-fearing people in our society to
I
do
know.
things,
I'm so
violent
glad
things
we're
that no one
past.
would imagine,
I'm so
you
glad
know,
we're past that in this
or
country.
things like, like QAnon and disbelieving doctors and on and on and on, and underground chambers underneath the Capitol building where a political party has kept all the children and I say this reluctantly as I drink on my big tall glass of adrenochrome, so I guess I'm stereotyped, but
oh no, no, you don't drink it.
oh, I've been taking it the wrong way. No wonder I feel so rotten.
Yeah, it's more effective other ways.
Oh,
Yeah. You got
Well,
mainline.
can you show me on the camera what you're meaning?
Yeah. Later on, I'll
Okay.
share archival footage.
That you have to be a Patreon to see that kind of stuff.
Is that archival footage of Hunter S. Thompson doing it? Is that what it is?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I thought it was interesting at one point. Well, by the way, before we get off on that, any I'm
Here's the
not a
fun.
lawyer, I'm not an attorney, but any legal threats you might have had in that regard, that strikes me as like paper tiger situation. Like I just
You're
don't see
talking
that.
about me like writing and disclosing the stuff?
Yeah, writing a book about the Georgia Guidestones, I don't see how there could be any legal obstruction to doing that.
Um, yeah, it was done in a not so subtle way.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll challenge that one day. Now, it's a whole different issue about the family of like the Kirstens and the Merrimans, because I did run into a couple of them that got to be pretty scary when I gave them the courtesy of, sharing some things and seeing if they wanted to add to it because um, Kirsten's, son was implicated by the people there in Dodge, Fort Dodge. They implicated him as being participants, and so did actually Wyatt Martin. That Kirsten's son was the main person he interacted with, at least at the end.
Interesting.
So, a family member was aware of it, but
So
they were powerful people. I mean, we're talking about Washington
sure.
lobbyists, state senators, that kind of people. Top corporate attorneys for like Fortune 500 companies, and I've always wondered, it's sort of curious if because the guy who I always loved, which was he was called the town Gadfly there in Fort Dodge, um, uh, in with the beard,
Yeah.
oh man, he had fought this battle himself. It was the documentary should be called His Vindication because this whole document confirmed hunches that he had.
Hmm.
And that's why you see the little clip, in the trailer for it where he says, "This is astonishing." Uh,
Yeah.
but yet he wasn't totally surprised. But the audacity of it is what surprised him. But he had been tailing that family, and he told me off camera, and I better be careful what I say here, but that he had some goods of sort of like a Nazi thing, an
Uh-huh.
implication in that direction that he kept to protect himself, that he would
Oh, I see.
reveal. Okay. And I don't know why he didn't reveal it there at the end because what did he have to lose, I
Right.
don't know if he even saw the documentary. Uh, things things got a little crazy for a while because of somebody who was a no-gooder who was trying to cause headaches to Chris and I. And so I kept a low profile and also not to get in Chris's knickers because he saw this as his project, even though by his voluntary nature, he gave me a co-producer title, even
Yeah.
though I didn't have editorial rights, which I hate, but I was co-producer. Um, but um, I forgot my train of thought there. But anyway, it was a curious set of experiences on some of the threats that we got on this kind of stuff.
It sounds like what you're saying is that you did the responsible thing and you reached out to the family and gave them
Right.
an opportunity to give their side of the story, and
Correct.
instead they got pissed at you.
Well, at least one or two of them did, particularly on Kirsten's, and one in particular, made some threats, and um, so um, I'm not quite sure, the things on like from legally and stuff, what's appropriate, what's not, whatever. So we had to err on the side of caution on that.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
um, but the main story got out. That's the main thing. The main story got out.
Sure.
It is what it is. People can deal with it or ignore it or whatever. The perceptive person, the grown-up person, which now the only kind of people I care about anymore, uh, they can connect the dots here. They can see the significance of it. Um, and now some of the mainstream people, they'll make a snide comment about production. Like even what was it, John Oliver said something about some shitty documentary or something like that. But after that, everything he claimed, he took it as gospel truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, everything he
Yeah.
mentioned after he presumed that it was true. I
Yeah,
thought,
because
well, you could call that all day long, but if you believe that the findings are true,
Yeah.
what you complain about, that's what happens when you're in Hollywood. When you're in Hollywood, production values are all that matters. It's bling.
Right.
Bling is all
yeah.
they care about. And maybe in that, back to the podcast we were talking about, that bling was a priority in their production.
Mhm.
What
You know,
is the
they looked at all the money and they did a lot of background little video things and songs and music and all the transitions. And I guess there's certain people, that's the main thing they're looking for, or people today that have short attention span. That's more critical to them than the facts. But that's not me.
Right. Well,
That's not
I mean, who's the real audience? Like, is this really a test reel for their proposed Netflix documentary about the Georgia Guidestones? I mean,
yeah,
and some podcasts are like that. It's like they're auditioning for a full-fledged actual documentary.
probably.
Mike
Well,
the
one of the things I noticed when some of his quote findings that he had, one of them was when he went to go point out this preacher who confronted the town council and
Right.
wanted to get
Clint
rid
Clint
of.
Harper.
Yeah. I told them about all that when I met with them. I had gone and looked that up in the
right.
Elbert Star and did my digging, and I disclosed it because I'm just right up front, even if I'm, a fool or whatever. Because I wasn't planning to do anything else with it. So for the better good, but they never really gave me credit for having found that. It's not a huge deal. I don't care. But really, that was something that I had shared with them.
No, I understand why that would be annoying, particularly in episode 3, which is where they talk about Pastor Clint Harper. That's where
Yeah.
Tyler McBrien says, in reference to Dark Clouds over Elberton, he says, quote, "But nobody saw that documentary," unquote. And I thought, well, I saw it. That's not an accurate reportage there, you know.
Right.
When
So,
you go through these experiences, it really does tell you, well, everything that we're all exposed to. This same kind of scenario goes on and on and on, and it's just the tip of the iceberg. And it's always good to keep that in perspective. Just like my NBC interview that I was telling you all about. When you see these kind of things, just go to source material.
Mhm.
If they introduce you somebody that intrigues you, that's great. If it starts your journey to find out what went on, but never believe their little snippets. That's why I tell my friends, who I know I'm very old fashioned, watch the whole press conference when somebody speaks. Don't let somebody on YouTube give you some clips. Watch the whole thing, watch the whole interview, watch the whole political address, because a skillful editor can tell the opposite story from what the speaker is saying with skillful editing.
Mike, I'm gonna let
yes.
you watch those press conferences because I can't take them.
It's
But
masochistic.
well,
Take one for the team.
I was gonna say that the guy that the journalist, um, he worked for CNN when he first contacted you, and then I think he
Yeah.
he switched over to Atlanta Journal-Constitution. So really, I don't know what are his plans. Does he plan to write a book about this, or is he done with it too, or like what?
I've not had any further contact with him. You know, he,
Yeah,
he, he said the things in that episode too that were the most soothing to me. Not that I need to have my back scratched, but when he said, I went in there thinking, who are these guys? And going in to disprove it, just another nutcase. And he says, I couldn't do it. He
right.
says their product, it held up. It held up
Yeah,
to scrutiny as a journalist. And
yeah,
that gave me a lot of satisfaction.
yeah.
And that he bothered to say that, which I think was in a little contrast to the other participants there.
That's the thing that like I want to like say this about Dr. Future. Okay. While he was figuring out who the builder of the Georgia Guidestones was, he was also writing books and doing podcasts. And like this was like he was doing this like Mike did this in like his spare time.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny you said that because I have so many notes and other things I found that I couldn't get Chris to put in it.
Yeah.
There was a whole lot more stuff that could have gone in it. It may have been just trivialities to a lot of people, but it wasn't necessarily to me. And that was part of a little bit of our falling out. is that was why I was offered certain things, because I was originally just going to be an assistant there, but I ended up doing all the research on this stuff. And I think he, it basically come down to, well, I didn't ask you to do that. I didn't ask, even though he had offered me certain things.
You were
And
changing.
then later when he reneged and he didn't come through with it, it was, well, I didn't ask you to do any of that. Well, we wouldn't have really had a real documentary had it not been done.
No, there would be nothing there.
Right.
I mean, you essentially wrote the documentary.
Yeah, not
Yeah.
the script that the narrator
Yeah.
read, but
Yeah.
well, I had to fight hard to get most of that put in it.
I'll tell
Yeah.
you. I'll tell you a funny story. I was aware of all this that was going on at the time that Mike was researching this, and knew that he had. I think 2010, the same year that you did a lot of that, was the year I met you, Mike. And I remember taking like 2013 or so. I took my friend that lived in Georgia to see the Georgia Guidestones. I think it's the last time that I went down there, and the director was there when we got there with the guy reenacting as RC Christian. So I was like, "What's up? How's it going?" Like he
Was it
knew me,
that
you
soon?
know.
Was it that soon? I thought it was closer to 2015, because
Yeah, well, maybe it was 2015.
the
It's hard
reason
to,
why I say that is that as soon as we got all that and had all those revelations, Chris shelved it. Chris shelved the project.
yeah.
And I said,
Okay,
"Well,
maybe
aren't
it
you
was a
going to
little late.
release
It
it?
was a little later.
You
Yeah.
aren't you going to edit it? Aren't you going to release it?" And I just got blown off for 5 years.
Mm,
It just
mm.
sat. And in fact, there was no plan to go to Iowa. There was no plan to even go follow those
You
leads
did
to
that much
Iowa.
later. You did that much later.
And yeah, like 2015-ish.
Yeah.
And I had to fight like the dog to be able to go do that. But, I didn't have the control of the reins on
Was
it.
it because was he just getting skittish about where this was all heading?
Well, there probably is a little bit of that, maybe a little sheepishness about, hey, unlike his other kind, mostly he talks about reformers of 500 years ago, so you don't, um,
Well,
you
you're
know,
just putting a
the
monkey
few,
wrench in the whole narrative of the usual narrative that revolves around the Guidestone. So he didn't know how to process it, probably.
well, I think on that front, I think the I think what he was hoping for was that there was somehow the Jesuits were involved,
The UN, some UN cultural agency or
and
some shit. Yeah,
leftist.
yeah.
It was a big leftist kind of thing, because all of his other work sort of leads to that. You know, Probably people who came up with a bad translation of the Bible were probably behind it. That's my speculation, because that's always the boogeyman in every other one that's done.
As
And when he gets
translators.
this kind of stuff, this is like out of his, well, it was out of his agenda, and it was not something that would be normally fed to his core audience. So, and the other thing is, he was doing other kind of stuff that was more the red meat projects, red meat for the homeschoolers. And so that was a higher, and probably some of those people were maybe funding him, you know. I mean, the only real modern day people that I recollect that he would talk about were guys like Ian Paisley from Northern Ireland, who he saw as like the ultimate hero, who was the guy that, I started doing my reading on him. I think he was the main guy behind the Troubles in Northern Ireland
He
in
blew a few. He was responsible for
the
blowing a
Bloody.
few more things up than the people that blew up the Georgia Guidestones.
And one of the main, good, well said. And one of the biggest provocateurs, like when things calm down to get things bloody again. But that never came up in any Pinto documentary about that part of him. But he did say nasty things about the Pope, and that's what earned him a slot. But most of his stuff was about stuff 500 years ago. And so here we're talking about something that's more of a modern threat. And but I'm doing a little bit of speculation here. So based upon, just his, but he had higher priority stuff, and it just got on the shelf, and I kept asking and asking and asking, and I felt like all my research was done to waste. But I didn't spill the beans. I sat on my hands and then spilled the beans for it. So, I tried to be
The
faithful in that regard.
Yeah, so the movie came out in 2016, so it was probably 2015 that I took my friend there. I think that that's
Yeah.
correct
Yeah. Yeah. It
because
was 5 years on the
because he
film.
decided to go ahead and release it, but he wanted to film some reenactment scenes, and that's what he did. And there was a guy that was from our church that he took down there and had him in the hat and the trench coat
Yeah.
looking at the
Yeah.
Guidestones, you
Yeah.
know.
Because it has to look like the History Channel kind of thing, where they do
Right,
like the little
right.
thing you stand around and reenact. Yeah.
Yeah, I had gone like 3 different times to see the Guidestones by that point. I think that was the final time that I actually saw them.
Yeah. Well, one day you can tell
Uh,
your great grandchildren you were there when they were still standing
That's
on.
right. That's right. Yeah.
I regret the fact that I never had the opportunity to see them, and now we're breathing them. I guess that's the
Yeah.
only way to interact with them at this point. But I noticed that when I was looking at the back and forth, where you were talking about the editing process of Wikipedia and people going back and forth on
Yeah.
adding the documentary or not,
Yeah.
the objections that I kept seeing over and over again was referencing that director's other documentaries and saying, this guy's a nut. Look
Yeah.
at what else he has done. And for that reason, they kept taking down references to Dark Skies over Elberton.
Yeah.
So I wondered if that maybe was one of the reasons Tyler McBrien just chose not to mention his name at all in the podcast.
I think the documentary got a little. I think it got ghettoized because of the other material. It was hard to get
Yeah,
people. It was hard for me. Like there was a radio show slash podcast in Minneapolis. I won't say the name of it, but people probably know it. It was a fairly well known paranormal show, but they did true crime and they did historical mysteries, and like I actually gave a copy to the guy. I was like, watch this, see what you think. And then they're just like, this doesn't interest us. It's not up our alley. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, this is this kind of stuff you talk about, right? Yeah, but I
yeah,
think it was because it did come from a Christian point of view, and they just couldn't see past that.
Yeah,
yeah.
in addition to it being like from associated with conspiracy and conspiracy culture, then you have that too. And so for stereotypical, educated, secular, epistemic authorities, yeah.
You know what's funny on that last theme you brought up about being too Christian? The very last scene in the documentary was put after my approval. After I had
Correct.
Oh
looked
yeah,
at it, and that was
Correct. Yeah.
after about, oh, well, Christians never do stuff like this.
Yeah,
Christians
he
never.
was trying real
We've always
hard to find a
stopped it.
way to fit it in.
And
it pulls you right out of it, doesn't it?
I would have
That last,
never approved that. I saw that after it was released,
Mhm.
yeah.
after I had approved it. And that made me sad, not because I'm not a believer, but because, first of all, I know that's BS, that Christians don't do stuff like that, or people who profess to be.
And that goes to the core of all your research, Mike, is that
Right.
there are all these esoterically operating fundamentalist Christians who, in private or whatever, do not necessarily espouse those fundamentalist beliefs or in to all kinds of other stuff, and it's part of their different endeavors and political agendas, and yeah, I mean, it goes along with everything else that you've explored.
Right. And
I'm
the lowest of the low is when you do it in the name of somebody good like Jesus, who most everybody likes Jesus. Okay, most everybody turn the other cheek, doing to others you have to do, that kind of stuff. They don't have a problem with that. I don't care,
Well, even if you're just trying to
handful of people.
understand,
But it's
Yeah.
the lying part about our culture has clean hands, and we're
Right.
saying everybody knows better than that.
well, if
Maybe
you're
not the
just trying to
homeschoolers.
understand the history of any religious culture where people have to operate or feel they have to operate or benefit from operating with an outward appearance of religiosity, and then an inner esoteric thing. I mean, that's in all cultures. So it's like if you can't understand that, then you're not going to really understand the history of
Yeah.
anybody.
Yeah.
I might have used this metaphor before, but when you're watching Dark Skies over Elberton, to me, it feels like you're driving down a straight road, and then the closing narration, it feels as if the passenger suddenly grabbed the steering wheel, and then suddenly you're going off the road
Yeah.
and into a tree.
Well, I want to
It,
go
it,
on the record and say I had nothing to do with that.
yeah, I assume that.
Yeah.
I just assumed that when I was watching it.
I found out when it was released and when what I had seen ended prior to all of that because I would have protested it. Um, and I say that as a person of faith because you don't have legitimate faith if you're not truthful. If you're not truthful about your own dirty laundry, then you can't do any spiritual good to anybody. And so anyway, I was ashamed of that.
It's honestly something that, like, it I think it just had he wanted to make it fit to the rest of his material. I mean,
Right.
that expectation of the other stuff, because a lot, like you said, a lot of a lot of his other films are primarily to a homeschool audience.
This one's totally an oddball. This one's
Yeah,
totally an oddball because
it is.
he has a narrative and then he feels. Now, that's not to say that some of the earlier stuff I saw of his, like his very early, at the time and what other people knew, had some use. Like,
Yeah.
all the Christian community was so much into David Barton and his reinvention of America's history and stuff. Now, later when I released my last book, I was able to put a little bit more emphasis on like when that was done in like a 2 or 3 year period when all that was invented. He didn't want to touch any of that. But when he started showing about like, it's a little bit more complicated, the founding fathers and what their beliefs were and stuff like that. And even, touching people like Billy Graham and asking questions and whatever, that's a good, healthy thing to do to get people out of their comfort zone. But then things started going off the rails pretty quick. And in fact, some of the latest stuff that I've seen refutes his earlier stuff. And you could say that's growth as long as you really think it's something better. That's the big debate. Is he gone to something better? And I don't think more of the sovereign citizen, we should take up arms and overthrow our government is necessarily a spiritual growth evidence. But that's just me.
In the documentary Dark Skies Over Elberton, it's as if the beginning and the end remained exactly the same, and everything in the middle actually went off into a completely different realm. But he felt compelled to pull it back to where he wanted it to go at the very end.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that just before the podcast delves into the connection between Kirsten and William Shockley, who, by the way, was frequently discussed by Mae Brussel back in the 70s because of his connection to Stanford University and the Pioneer Fund. William Shockley was a definite part of Mae Brussel's cast of characters, definitely in the 70s and 80s.
I'll have to find those because that was in her backyard, right? I mean, she was operating out in that neck of the woods.
Sure.
And she
yes, absolutely.
I've only heard a little bit about hers. I think you could probably, turn into a Unabomber or lose your mind going down some of the stuff she does, but it would be very fascinating. And some of
I've been going down
relevance today.
Oh, absolutely. I've been going down the Mae Brussel road and re-listening to stuff that she was doing in the early 70s, and it's absolutely astonishing. Some of the things that she's saying. It's so prescient. But I could probably send you links to specific episodes where she's talking about Shockley.
I would be very grateful for that. Yeah.
I will do that. So Tyler says, quote, "For those of you who don't know what eugenics is, fair warning, it's dark," unquote. And I thought, did they just give a trigger warning to eugenics? Like, is there anybody listening who was under the impression that eugenics was like this light, frothy subject? I just thought it was fascinating that he felt compelled to tell us that eugenics is a dark subject. So then he goes into Shockley and his whole, running for Congress as a Republican in 1982. And they also mentioned that in Kirsten's obituary, it actually says that one of his hobbies was the Republican Party. According to, there's a book called Broken Genius, The Rise and Fall of William Shockley, creator of the electronic age, where they go into Shockley being a member of Bohemian Grove and how he even participated in the plays they would put on every summer, which I would love
What
to
year?
see.
What years were he involved?
According to both Broken Genius, Shockley was there like every year for decades. That was something that
Like what
he,
period of time would you guess?
I'm thinking like from the 60s all the way through into the at least like 2 decades there, like
Okay,
60s,
beyond.
70s.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
The reason why I ask is in I'm doing a little detour book right now that is going to take a lot of research, but it's one of these books I need to write before I die. But when I go back and do volume 2 of my two masters thing, I'm going to have a long chapter with the rest of what I found about J. Howard Pugh, um, founder of Sunoco. He's really the father of the evangelical, mass media environment. That's him. He was the one who bankrolled Christianity Today and most of those things I talk about in my book. And finding out stuff that had convincing proof he was actually an officer in the John Birch Society and things like that. When I found his folder on Bohemian Grove himself and how he was invited by the Sentinels, which was a neo-Nazi group that was part of the business plot, to overthrow the government in 33.
yeah.
And J. Howard Pugh was in the middle of it. He was fingered there right on the floor of Congress, being involved in it. But he was invited by the Sentinels to come to Bohemian Grove, like 47, and he was there with shared a cabin with Hoover, J. Edgar Hoover, their caveman camp, the one I think that Nixon belonged to later.
Yeah.
The Bohemian
So
Grove.
Bohemian Grove.
So is this side book you're working on about Bohemian Grove or about a different?
No.
It's a cool story.
That's volume 2 of my two masters. I'll go into some more stuff I've found on him, but the this other book I'm doing is more of a pure spiritual theology book and showing a little bit about how a faith got co-opted long time ago, 1,000 years ago, and all the doom and gloom that we've been taught, people like me growing up, it was not always that way. And so, it's for a special audience that are interested in things spiritual, but the purpose is to liberate people. And I had to first liberate myself. So, but there's some historical stuff in there that's disturbing. But
Mike, could you share that story of how you came across that Bohemian Grove material, or do you need to save that?
oh, well, no, I'll just mention it. Please, everybody forget it shortly afterwards, so then you'll be surprised when you read it one day. No, I actually somehow found out that his papers were at the University of Delaware. And this was during COVID. So this tells you how long I've been distracted doing this stuff. And so they could not let me in the building to do it. And so because of that, they gave me a little compromise and I asked for some of the topics that were in the file cabinets of J. Howard Pugh. Because I mean, he is the main guy who formed what we know as Evangelical America, was J. Howard Pugh. And when they started reading these things off, and I don't remember if I saw something they sent me or if they read it, but just Bohemian Grove grabbed out. And I said, Bohemian Grove? I said, yes, I need to get the contents of that. And they had no idea what it was. The people at the university had no idea what well, whatever. And the next thing I can't remember if they faxed it to me or mailed it. Maybe they mailed it. But then I have like the handbill program for the cremation of care ceremony in my hands. And I don't know how many people that have not been attendees actually have an original handbill copy of the cremation of care. And it had J. Howard Pugh's notes on there talking about how wonderful he thought it was. And I thought he'd be condemning this as this dour. He was one of the top Presbyterian officials in America. And he was very, very extremely strict. And in the FBI records I have of him, Hoover had to tell Pugh to calm down and not be so extreme and not be such a red baiter. Now that's something if Hoover has to tell you to calm down from being, because he was trying to out every single minister and every rival that he had of his religious work. He was in the FBI file. He's constantly sending letters to Hoover. Well, this guy's a red. This guy, this theologian, this, and Hoover was trying to say they all can't be communist. That's how extreme he was. But back to Herbert Kirsten, when I was following this chain of um, documents and going through the FBI records, the Congress of Freedom came up, and I don't. Are you familiar, Robert, with the Congress of Freedom?
No.
It was a hard right anti-communist group of and the other thing is with J. Howard Pugh, he was tied in with Willis Carto. Now that name may ring a bell more in
Sure.
the neo-Nazi thing. And it was interesting when I got the files on Willis Carto and then his leadership within the Congress of Freedom, and and there were informants, FBI informants that were telling what they saw. Even a guy who came in to fix his copier in Willis Carto's office reported back to the FBI local office that he saw all these pictures of Adolf Hitler inside Willis Carto's office, which made him a little unnerved. But in the Congress of Freedom, I can't remember, it was like 52 or whatever, maybe it was one of their first meetings, and one of them was held in the upper Midwest. And when I looked at the attendees, of all the attendees, sure enough, there was a Herbert W. Kirsten, MD, as one of the attendees of this extremist, virulent anti-communist group. But the thing I found most interesting was the meeting they had in, I believe it was 63, around September, October. It was in New Orleans. And their informants, these FBI records that I got had the informants' reports back to the FBI. And what they were saying at this meeting was they saw all of these Eastern European assassins, paid assassins that were at this meeting. And they knew them because of what activity they'd been in before the FBI cornered them being, to being an informant. And so they knew these guys and they're like, they're here for some reason. And then he went to one of the meetings at the Congress for Freedom, and he actually had like a listing, I think, of the actual agenda. And it showed about taking out JFK. And again, this was in New Orleans in the fall of 63.
Whoa.
So I find that really interesting. And I never hear anybody else talk about that. But they were talking in this meeting about assassinating JFK.
Fascinating.
And I never have been real deep into that because when you go into that well, it's like a black hole. You don't come out. But that got my attention. And particularly because I've never heard anybody else mention it. And I thought the New Orleans connection was a very interesting
Well,
part. But, that was a time capsule then. They didn't put two and two together like it was really going to happen. But I bet you that those informants, when they saw it did happen, they probably got pretty scared that they had reported on it.
well, it's interesting. One of the things that, if you've ever watched the series The Men Who Killed Kennedy, I mean, it's very old now. It's like, from the 80s, but like it goes into the possibility that like Corsican hitmen were used.
Yeah.
And you could almost see like there could be maybe that they would mistake a Corsican for an Eastern European. That's entirely
Sure.
possible. I'm just
Sure.
speculating there,
Well,
but that's not without the realm of possibility.
did they ever identify who the tramps were?
Fred Kurzman.
Yes, absolutely. And E. Howard Hunt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
don't think it's ever been. I mean,
there were so many people doing things, and I don't even know a third or a tenth of it, but people with umbrellas opening and everything else. And the
right.
question, was there anybody there on the grassy knoll who wasn't an assassin?
I don't know, man. I got the master list of witnesses right here if you want to consult.
Oh, there you that's like the secular version of the prophecy chart from the Bible
yeah. Oh,
prophecy.
yeah.
Mike, I don't know why you don't have one of your stock car little dioramas as like Dealey Plaza. I don't know why you
Well,
don't.
it's funny
It's
for my
with
slot
them
car.
all pointed, like you got the
Motorcade,
umbrella
real time.
man and the polka dot dress
I
girl.
do have a version of that in 32nd scale. I have like a Lincoln with the suicide doors in it, that the establishment would drive. And I've got some John Birchers in there that has sign about,
Okay.
that the Supreme Court justice is a communist and
I gotta see that. Take a picture of
Martin
it.
Luther King.
Yeah.
And I'm painting the characters, and there are some Hell's Angels confronting them, and some Vietnam vets, and I have some Symbionese Liberation Army
I
guys
don't
on the
know. The
slot
the
car
Hells
track.
Angels might have been on the same side, but yeah.
Yeah, well, but there's some Moonies there. There are some the Zodiac killer. He's behind the stands. He's
Yeah.
standing with somebody's body, and they got a few Moonies there, and so it's well represented. It's like a rainbow coalition of darkness
The Zodiac
in
killer. Just
microcosm.
throw
If
him
I
in
was
there just for fun.
yeah, sure miss the '60s. Those were the good old days.
This might be a side road, but since you mentioned Bohemian Grove, I've always been fascinated by the fact that in 1974 there were two books published by Bohemian Grove by major publishers, one by Harper and Row and the other by Harcourt Brace. One is called The Bohemian Grove and Other Retreats: A Study in
I
Ruling
love
Class Cohesiveness by G. William Domhoff. And then there's a second one called The Greatest Men's Party on Earth Inside the Bohemian Grove by John Vanderzee. And
Robert,
what's interesting is,
are you looking at Surfiel's Surfio?
Yeah.
He just pulls the
oh, good,
book
yeah.
right off his
Oh,
shelf,
oh, excellent. Yes, I love that cover.
Which
Fantastic cover.
Domhoff is a really awesome academic who studied power elites, wrote the Anglo-American establishment, and then applied network theory to he's like he's really like the one of the real academic pioneers of conspiracy theory when you don't call it conspiracy theory.
Right. Well, what's interesting is both books were published by mainstream publishers. Both books are more from an academic kind of left-wing perspective. And there was also an article in the New York Times in '77 that talked about the cremation of care and all that, called Bohemian Grove, Where Big Shots Go to Camp. So I just think it's interesting that nobody really paid attention to it until Alex Jones, until like the far right started talking about it.
Yeah.
Which is
When they
interesting.
started talking about the Babylonian Canaanite rituals.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, Moloch. And
Yeah.
I was contacted by Christopher Moore, who's a best-selling novelist. He was writing a book that later came out called Noir, which was published in 2018. And it's kind of like a humorous novel set in San Francisco in 1947. And it involves Bohemian Grove. And he knew I was like interested in these things. So we were exchanging emails. And he told me this story about how he was actually contacted, because he lives in that area in San Francisco. He was contacted by the Grove. They wanted to recruit Christopher Moore into the Grove. And they actually had like a lunch meet. He met with all these other Grove members, and they said that they were a little embarrassed by the fact that Bohemian Grove had historically been established by artists, but they didn't have any artists
Right.
as part of the Grove anymore. So
Right.
they were actively trying to recruit more like literary types and artists into the Grove, I guess, to improve the reputation in some way.
Right.
And Christopher Moore said they were kind of doing this back and forth, feeling each other out. And Christopher Moore happened to mention he was talking about the demonization of immigrants, and he said everything just went silent after that. He was kind of quietly disinvited. So anyway, this inspired the novel Noir. I haven't read the book, but it's a satirical book about Bohemian Grove, I guess.
Does anybody know when? Because it does start off as a meeting of artists in the San Francisco area,
Mhm.
the Bohemian Club.
Like Jack London.
Yeah.
Right.
And And
Yeah, oh,
Jack
yeah. I mean,
London.
it's
Yeah,
yeah. So it's artists, writers, intellectuals. When does it
yeah.
switch to
Dashiell
become
Hammett.
this Republican Party, unofficial retreat for the, you know, ultra elite
Oh, isn't that interesting?
policy
It's like that
making?
pattern again of something on the left being kind of like hijacked by the far right and then twisted into something it was not intended to be,
I
And
would,
then
I
meanwhile,
would guess
you
that
have,
that goes hand in hand with Mike's research when the, still at the time, the WASP establishment and everybody was like, okay, we need to use this holy roller shit to save capitalism.
right.
right. Yes. Yeah. Um, I know that you discussed Bohemian Grove in volume one
Right. Right.
of your book, do you
It
not?
just it just like a lot of things in that book, it just fell in the lap. I wasn't going and
Yeah.
looking for that at Bohemian Grove, but when I'm reading the narrative off of, you know, the early founding of the libertarian movement, it just came up in the narrative of the libertarian history. And, of course, they were very, very matter of fact. They didn't make any big deal about it. I thought it was a big deal, but that's where the money comes. That's where you're going to make your money pitch. But I was going to
Yeah.
ask you, Robert, do you have or have you seen a copy of the actual cremation of care handbill that they hand out?
No, oddly enough, I was just in the special stacks at CSU Long Beach, and they have the those annual books that they publish with the plays in them.
Yeah.
They have like these really old books that going back way back. But I didn't see, I never saw that. No.
Well, the reason why I mentioned that is when they sent me the stuff from J. Howard Pugh's files, and I got the Bohemian Grove papers. It included the handbill from the cremation of care ceremony. This would have been in 47 when he went. Um, and it says very clearly it was supposedly from the author of the cremation of care. I guess probably its modern version at the time that they used. And they say in the handbill that it has a deeper metaphysical meaning that was intended beyond what the average Grover would comprehend.
Yeah.
Now, I don't mean to imply that's anything spooky or anything, but people have said that, and people say, "Oh, you're just crazy." You're thinking they're trying to do something, deeper than just boys having fun and dressing up like the Shriners. But they say up front that there was intended to communicate that kind of thing, and the average people, it made me think about like Freemasonic stuff. The Freemasons that I have known and the good old boys where I've grown up, all this stuff, it's like goes in one ear and out the other. Now, they may not be aware of how it changes their thinking and formulates it, but they don't grasp. But that doesn't mean that there weren't original metaphysical occult ways of thinking that formed the basis of Freemasonry, whatever it is. And that's the way this was written at for Bohemian Grove.
Esoteric, yeah.
And
Well,
that's in fact that was the same thing of what was meant when they dedicated the Parthenon in Nashville,
Yeah.
and they did that metaphysical play that they did. And if you're familiar with this stuff, you all are more so than I. You look at it, it's like, well, of course, like these things are all archetypes of these kind of things. It looked like a mystery play, like one of the mysteries.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a
Mister
mystery.
Mister 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 Metatron.
And that was, yes, right, Sydney,
Yeah,
Metatron, blah. But that was sort of chic back then. I
yeah.
guess that was a fad in England and here, maybe France. I don't know.
Well, he influences that the guy you're talking about. I think was it Sidney Hirsch,
Yeah.
Sergio, I think.
Yeah, I
Like,
think
like he had this
name
weird middle name, it's Metatron,
Metatron. Yeah,
Good.
I don't know
and
what's weird about that, but yeah, I think
he
you were.
he influences. I mean, he's a big influence on the fugitives.
He's the gathering point of the fugitives,
Yeah,
who then also developed the philosophy of Southern agrarianism prior to it becoming the status quo of the Republican Party for who knows how long now.
Well, to answer your question, Adam, I do not know exactly at what point the Bohemian Grove morphed from its original inception
Yeah.
to what
That
it
wasn't
is now.
anything,
I would like to know
right? I'm sure it's
how
been.
exactly that happened.
I think we've seen this happen now with Burning Man.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
Burning Man starts out very similar, right? It starts out as like just a bunch of freaks getting together in the desert, having fun, artists, and now it's become this like, it's the party for the tech bros now.
You invite too many
Right.
of your sponsors. That's what
Mm.
happens.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
it's
Right.
always
Good,
I,
good, good,
I
good point. Good point.
this is not based on any actual information I have, but because I haven't looked into it deeply enough. But I've always suspected, just seeing the cremation of care and reading the text of it and everything. I just sort of interpreted it the way I would interpret a song or a poem or a short story, and I always suspected that it may have started when the Grove was begun by these artists and actual bohemians, that the cremation of care ritual may have begun as satire, satirizing a particular perspective of the elite. And
Yeah.
then the elite actually came in and took it over and didn't even see
They
that it
didn't
was
see the irony.
satirical.
No.
Didn't
Yeah.
see the irony
Right.
of it at all.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Right.
and thought, well, this is a great idea. This expunges all the guilt that I build up over the year when I have to fire all my employees because of the stock
Right.
market crash or whatever it is. And
It'd
so
be
that's
wonderful to know what a Samuel Clemens or a Ambrose Bierce would say on that corporatization of it. I'm sure they would have had a very uh gimlet eye on
It's
what
not.
happened.
absolutely.
It's not
Uh,
too far. It's not too hard to say or far fetched to think that any of those artists, at least one of them, may have been aware of the rights of Molech or how they perceive it,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah,
just
yeah.
based it on that.
Well,
right.
let me
I
to answer.
I mean,
Well,
I guess okay, go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No,
To
no.
comment on when it changed, if I could put a book in on the latest,
Yeah.
I would say definitely
Sure.
by the time that Herbert Hoover pretty much took it over. I would say that would have been pretty complete by that time.
The coup from the leadership.
The takeover of the insiders and the movers and shakers would have at
Yeah.
least been complete by the time Hoover. But what's that? That's probably 20s and maybe sooner, because I'm sure he was the head of Stanford long before that.
There was probably a good amount of artists still. It was probably a mixed crowd, and then eventually, yeah, just like it's like gentrification.
They started
it's
calling him
right.
chief for a reason.
it's funny to me because I guess it'll probably swing back around again, but I feel like the like early 2010s, like the Bohemian Grove, the Bilderberg, everybody talked about this shit. Everybody talked about it, and
Yeah.
like it took time for that Alex Jones documentary to circulate on YouTube, and people were talking about it. And you don't hear anything about the Bilderberg group. You don't hear anything about Bohemian Grove anymore. Like none of that is even in the conspiracy theory circles anymore that I've seen.
Well,
And
they
you
got to
think
stop
it would be,
vaccines.
you'd think it would be, especially with the
Yeah.
QAnon and how crazy things have gotten with the Epstein stuff. You think it would be, but it's just not. You don't really hear about it. Or at least
Yeah,
Everybody's
do you
gotten
think
dumbed down.
yeah, do you think anybody will ever blow up the giant owl statue like they blew up Georgia Guidestones?
I mean,
Well, what I do
I'm
know
sure
is when it
that's
does happen, Robert Guffey will be the first suspect.
I can handle it.
They'll come get him first. Like he was the first one to envision it.
you
Uh,
blew up
He's
the
the
giant
master
owl.
Yeah.
well, I was in the podcast, they actually mentioned a number 912-302-BOOM that you can call in for tips. And I was actually thinking of calling in and saying, there's this podcast hosted by these two guys, and they're obsessed with conspiracies. And one of them moved to the Pacific Northwest right after the explosion. You should look into
Yes.
these guys.
Yes. Right. Well, there aren't any extremists in the Pacific Northwest, so I don't know why
Oh,
he would go
that's
there if he
done.
was messed into that.
Now, are you
Something.
talking about, now, are you talking about Greater Idaho or the state of Jefferson?
Hey,
What's the state of Jefferson? What is that?
It's like a slight.
Eastern
You
Washington?
probably know more than me.
right.
It's like, but when I was driving through Northern California, I saw giant signs on barns saying "State of Jefferson." I think it's a slice of Northern California on up to.
Right, right.
Well, Robert Serfiel he went and communed with Saint Germain not long ago on Mount Shasta. So
Oh, did you? Did you go to Mount Shasta?
Spent some time. I was looking up there with the binoculars. I didn't see the temple and all that, but
You
I
didn't
didn't see
see the
Saint
Great
Germain.
White
random
Brotherhood?
ascended masters in full robes just walking through the streets. Had cut like diagonally through a parking lot. No shit.
Were they the secret chiefs?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. I don't know. I'm not worthy to petition them.
I
So
just had I was teaching a creative writing class. It was a creative nonfiction class, where you write autobiographical stories. And one student wrote about her and her mom went up to Mount Shasta and took ayahuasca. And so, and the whole story was about what happened. Did you take ayahuasca while you were up there, or did you,
I did not. I did
there
not.
was no mind altering substances taken in Mount Shasta?
I wouldn't say that, but nothing that serious. Yeah.
Oh, I see. I see. I see.
Is there any ayahuasca in the Shasta soft drinks? Now that you mention that in Shasta.
It's like Coca-Cola, how it used to have actual cocaine in it.
Yeah.
Shasta used to have a little bit of the actual Mount Shasta in it.
Huh.
Have you been there? I'm sure you've been there, right, Robert? Like you've been to Mount Shasta.
No, that's going to Mount Shasta and visiting the Georgia Guidestones was on my list. I can cross one of them off now.
Well, Mount Shasta hasn't been blown up yet, so
No, not yet. No. So yeah, I'll have to do that.
You
By the way,
mentioned an interesting scenario though when you were talking about the owl and going after it, and I need to implicate myself here. I'm really surprised with the people who still care about stuff like Bohemian Grove with the advent of drones that you wouldn't even get like a drone assault on a gathering like
yeah,
that these days.
right. Yeah, that is curious.
I have been
Maybe there's a
around and taken a video of it up close on off hours out of season or whatever. It's happened a few times.
like you're gonna give somebody an idea on this.
Yeah, that'll be on my eulogy. They'll say his main contribution was originating that idea.
Um,
and then that Atlanta
I,
newspaper can do another podcast about it.
Right, right.
Robert, I did want to tie in something from the beginning of this conversation when you guys were
Uh-oh.
just free talking here. I did.
Is this William Frawley you're going to bring up?
Yeah, so a little like research on William Frawley, and apparently he had been in silent films. He was a vaudeville actor,
Right.
and he was actually in some of the Keystone Cops with Fatty Arbuckle. So we could
Oh,
tie it
oh,
into the greater conspiracy with Fatty Arbuckle, and
Hollywood Babylon.
absolutely.
yeah,
Well, yeah. Well, there are theories that the Fatty Arbuckle trial was a distraction from the creation of the Council on Foreign Relations in the same year.
I've never this.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a new one on me.
That explains a lot of things. Yeah.
Is that why they set him up so they could have the distraction?
Yes, that is one theory about that. Of course, you have a lot of amazing, Hollywood scandals at that same time. I mean, the death of the mysterious murder of Thelma Todd, who was known as the what they call the ice cream blonde. She was in movies with the Marx Brothers and Bill Lugosi, and then you have Charlie Chaplin's various sexual escapades, and of course the theory that in 1924 William Randolph Hearst killed the Western producer Thomas Inc. while attempting to kill Charlie Chaplin for having sex with Marion Davies, which was later turned into the film The Cat's Meow by Peter Bogdanovich. So that all these sort of Hollywood scandals happen around the same time period. It's rife for that kind of intrigue.
Well, have you ever heard the theory that the the murder, Virginia Rappe, the Fatty
Sure.
Arbuckle, supposedly killing
Yeah.
her. The theory that was like it was like some kind of weird sex ritual.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like that's
Only like I've never heard it. I can't associate it with a particular quote researcher unquote. I mean, do you remember a particular person talking about this, like David Icke or something?
it's mentioned in the 60 greatest conspiracies book. They talk
Oh,
about
is
it.
it?
Yeah. Yeah, he
Ah,
talks about it in there.
I don't
Um
see that Kenneth Anger insinuates that some events are, in that synchromistic way, that, just insinuation that events are even unintended occult rituals that create ripple effects through reality.
right. That's it.
right.
Yeah.
Uh,
Like there was something about Elephas Levi and there's something about the musk of the elephant, and of course Fatty Arbuckle was a big dude, and it's weird.
that's re-
It's
that's
bizarre.
like
Yeah.
pre James Shelby Downard
Yeah. Right. Right.
stuff there.
I'm
Yeah.
just so glad you guys are quoting David Icke and Kenneth Anger to raise the scholastic quality of
Well,
the
you know what?
confidence that everyone has in the findings here.
I did need to mention something, and that is that I recently saw a cinematic masterpiece called Lord of the Shadows.
You did.
Uh, and I watched it 2 weeks ago,
Did it
and
change
I
your
was
life? Did it
it
change your life?
absolutely it was a life-changing cinematic experience, I have to
Yeah.
say. I have to say I enjoyed every minute of it.
You know,
Uh,
I have to say that was the least technically proficient from an equipment standpoint, which is really saying a lot of a pantload production.
Was that
To,
on
to
VHS or
say it was
Super
the least.
VHS, Mike?
Do what?
Was
That
that
was
on VHS or
VHS.
Super VHS?
And it was not only on VHS, but I unlike Nightmare on Neptune, which was done on actually a TV training school editor, which was pretty good editor. It was on some worn out deck that a guy who filmed weddings let me use. And it was so dirty that at the beginning of the movie, you can hear pops every time there's a cut. Pop, 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 pop. And my lighting on that, since most of it was done at night, I had basically like a little pull golf cart that I would put a car battery and had electrical extension cords out of a house that I wired the raw wires to these car headlights that I would put on these stands, and they had all of about 5 minutes of light. So it was sort of that. What do they call it? Chiaroscuro. What's the kind of lighting from the 20s and 30s where it's like severe shadow? But that I did
sure.
that. I pioneered that out of necessity because I had very little light to use in that movie. But you
Well,
know,
I have to say,
even as primitive as it was, at least it has a story. It has a coherent story, at least.
I was in all honesty, I've seen recent films like Wonder Woman 1984, which was probably like over $200 million budget, right?
Yeah.
Or the recent Flash movie or Ant-Man 3. I mean, I sat through these movies hoping it would be over soon so I could leave. This movie, I enjoyed every second of it, and I'm sure the budget was much less than 200 million.
Yeah, just move it about 6 or 7 decimal points. I think it was 200, but it was $200.
I will say this that I have had the privilege of watching Nightmare and Neptune with Dr. Future here, and it's nothing like being with the director himself as he explains to you everything.
Oh yeah,
There is a scene in Nightmare on Neptune where you have some music and it's kind of just a black. I think you're traveling through space and you have
Yeah,
a black screen and you've got this like ethereal music and you can hear a washer, a dryer in the background,
yeah.
and there's this click, 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 and I'm like, what is that noise? And Mike explains to me that someone he was trying to film and someone didn't want to turn the dryer off, and
Had a pair of jeans in there. Had the thing. We had to do the sounds of us talking in our space helmets, and this was done after the movie was done. And I had to go back to Louisville to film it with this guy. at his home, and we were all there with the toilet paper rolls in front of our mouth, which gave it sort of a radio sound. And his mom, she just had to get those jeans dry. And so for all of recorded history, you can hear that tap, click, click, tap, tap, click. But maybe they think that was something I did intentionally for sound editing to have a certain effect. Maybe cosmic rays coming through our thing or something like that.
Well, right. It's like in Manchurian Candidate. There's a scene where Frank Sinatra, was not a trained actor, so he would do
Right.
like one take and nail it, and he could not do that same. He could not get up to that same level of intensity again,
Yeah.
and so he does this long monologue where he's staring directly into the camera, and Frankenheimer tells him, "Oh my God, the camera, it focused on the metals on your lapels, and you're out of focus. We have to do it again." And Sinatra like went back and just like wept in his dressing room because he knew he had nailed it and could not do it again. So eventually Frankenheimer just said, "Okay, fuck it. We'll just go with this take, even though it's slightly out of focus." So later, when the movie premieres, critics were talking about how amazing it was that he had chosen to do this scene out of focus because it's from the point of view of the Manchurian Candidate who's in under hypnosis. So they said it was amazing that he's slightly out of focus. It fit into the subject matter, the tone of that scene. But of course, it was just a technical glitch. Now,
that's where
in the
things like
last,
that come. When I did Lord of the Shadows, in the library scene where I'm reading about the Kuchakan, the Shadow Lord, and how he rocks,
yeah,
reading all that, we had to go back. I don't know if we missed the scenes or something happened. It didn't work out. And I had to go set up an artificial insert of those scenes. And when it was done, the lighting was so bad that even by my very low standards, you could tell obviously they were done after the fact and were not in the library. So that's where I got the idea to make it a flashback scene where you could see the overlay of the video. And I had very little capability. This is not a digital editor, this is almost like a virtual splice kind of editor. And so I put the overlay of that to cover up that bad lighting of like what we witnessed in the prior skirmish. And it turned out perfect. It was like, well, that almost looked like I knew what I was doing. But it was all, and that's the serendipity that makes it so much fun doing things like that. And again, it's the antithesis coming back to the podcast that we were talking about earlier. When you don't have money, you somehow make something that for weirdos like you and me and the others here enjoy so much more. And I
Absolutely.
can tell you, Adam can testify that the movies that I have suggested him to in my collection are not necessarily the highest quality movies that have ever been done. But boy, they're sure a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah. Well,
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, I think that's the thing about DIY is like, it wasn't always DIY now is just it's slick and it just looks
Everyone
well
has
produced
Yeah,
and
it's not even about money anymore.
yeah,
Everyone
right.
is in the exact same aesthetic, which is not
Right.
how film or music is supposed to be. It's supposed
Right.
to have
Right.
different textures. It's supposed to have, different uh, mediums, and
And they want to get rid of a period look. And I say that's what's charming for me. I like washed out color. I like pops in my thing. I like to go watch them walk into a bar and there's a cigarette machine there, and there's a phone booth. And now everything has gotten so much where they want to make it look so primo. It's just, I don't know. It's been circumcised of any virility, for lack of a better
Uh,
metaphor.
Robert, you mentioned that speaking of film, you did mention that when I reminded you about all this, that you had just seen Disclosure Day, which I've not seen and really not
Yeah, me neither.
very excited to see. I mean, I'll probably watch it if it's on, like one of the subscriptions that I have, but other than that, I'm not going to go out and really see it. But what did you have was, I mean, the people were making a big deal out of it, because the UAP stuff, but was there anything that stood out to you about it, or was it anything
There,
significant?
it's interesting. There's a lot to say, actually. I oddly enough, I watched Disclosure Day the day before yesterday, and then yesterday I watched Age of Disclosure. the documentary. And Disclosure Day, it's interesting how well, I had heard so many negative things about it that my expectations were so low that when I went in, I actually ended up enjoying it, even though
Right. Yeah.
there are plot holes that you can fly a starship through in Disclosure Day, which is fairly typical of other Spielberg David Koepp collaborations. But it's interesting that there's one element of the film that involves this alien technology that essentially enables the antagonist of the film to mind control others. So you can hold this alien cylinder in your hand and you can project your consciousness into somebody else and make them become like a Manchurian candidate assassin. He actually puppeteers this woman to grab a knife and kill and try to kill her boyfriend. So it's kind of like Possessor, the Brandon Cronenberg film. And as I was watching it, I just thought it was interesting that this technology is attributed to advanced alien technology when in fact the United States government figured out how to do that like back in World War II. That there was
Yeah.
no
Right.
alien technology necessary to figure out how to do that. But in the film, it's attributed to alien technology. And it's also odd because the aliens are shown to be, the implication is that these are benign beings. But for some reason, they have this technology that can turn you into a remote control killer. Um, uh, there's a lot of strange, contradictions in the film. But it's also interesting that it should come out at this particular point in time,
Right.
particularly in conjunction with Backrooms and Obsession, and how these films like Supergirl and the new Minions movie and the Spielberg movie have all been underperforming these kind of franchise films. And even though Disclosure Day is not a sequel, in a way it is. It's a sequel to Close Encounters. It's a Spielberg movie, so it is
Right.
part of a franchise, the Spielberg
Yeah.
franchise. And all these movies have been underperforming, whereas Backrooms and Obsession, two films made by people in their 20s, and the budget was less than $2 million
Yeah.
for both, have
I'll-
far exceeded these other films that had such
Right.
huge budgets.
I watched
And
Obsession last night. It was made for it's great. I enjoyed it. It's
I
very
and
well done. Made for
I think it's
750,000, made 450 million. Like it's crazy.
And I think it's interesting that Obsession and Backrooms should hit at the same time because I see them as two poles of the history of horror films, in the sense that Backrooms is to me more of a idea horror film. It's more like Cronenberg or a Val Lewton film from the 40s, like The Cat People, where it's about an idea. And then Obsession is more of that tradition of just it's hitting raw emotion. It's not an idea film. It's hitting like the lizard part of your brain, and there are things about it that don't make sense. There's things about the plot of Obsession that do not make sense, but there are a lot of horror films like that. I mean, if you sit down and try to dissect, say, The Wolfman from 1941, you'll find a lot of things that don't make sense about it, but it makes sense on an emotional level, and that's true of Obsession as
It's
well.
basically Obsession's basically a retelling of the monkey's paw. I mean, it's essentially
It
that's
is.
what it is.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, you could,
Yeah.
if you wanted to criticize it, say it's like a half-hour Twilight Zone stretched out to 90 minutes. However, there are these amazing sequences that really do or really are effective. And I think one of the reasons Obsession is hit so much, particularly with people in their 20s, is that it's a kind of a Rorschach blot of a film. You can project onto it what you want. So I've seen like MAGA people, like incels, watching it, saying this confirms everything I'm afraid of regarding women. And then you could also see it as a feminist horror film making a statement about like toxic masculinity. It
Yeah.
fits
Yeah.
both of those
Yeah.
interpretations.
Yeah.
And so it appeals to a large base of people for that reason. You can
Well, I think
project
it's
onto it all.
I think I think it's an exploration of toxicity. I mean, it's what it
Sure,
is.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that Backrooms um, is doing far better than Disclosure Day, because I think that Backrooms is actually tapping into that sense of existential dread that has come along with AI and propaganda, media manipulation on the internet and social media, where people aren't even aware of where they are. They're not even aware of what objective reality is anymore. And Backrooms
Yeah.
reflects that anxiety, whereas Disclosure Day completely ignores it. And in fact, in order to accept what happens at the end of Disclosure Day, you have to completely forget that we're living in an environment in which disclosure is impossible. So at the in the I don't know how many. I mean, do you mind if I say what happens in the last scene of Disclosure
Spoiler
Day?
alert.
Jesus. I don't care.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So in the last scene, you were led to believe that there are these two people, at least two, who have been abducted, and one is a news broadcaster, and the other is a guy who would have access to secret technology, secret information. So apparently, over the course of several decades, these two people have slowly been brought together to disclose all of this, and so all this information is being uploaded into the television screen at the same time, and everybody is seeing it at the same time. They try to address this. At one point, you hear one of the technicians say, "Is this AI? Is this fake?" And on the screen, you see it says "real pixels." So that, yeah, the technician behind the screen would know that this is real footage, but no one else at home would know that. So afterwards, after the credits roll in the film is when the real film begins, because that's when everybody starts debating, what the fuck was that? That wasn't real. Yeah, there's no way that was real. In other words, the film thinks it's in an environment from maybe about 25 years ago,
Mhm.
where something like that would have an explosive impact, and everybody would agree
Mhm.
that this is disclosure. But in
Yeah.
2026, nobody would agree.
Mhm.
So the film is false in that sense. It requires you to believe that you're living in an environment you're not living in order to fully appreciate
Right.
the intended
Right.
impact. Whereas Backrooms is all about uncertainty and not knowing, where the hell am I? What is
In
any of
other
this
words,
real? What
Disclosure Day might as well be set in 1978 for, it's not.
it,
Right.
it, in order for it to be effective, it would have to be set in 1978. I mean, oddly enough, the message that Orson Welles was trying to get across with the War of the Worlds broadcast, which is don't believe everything you hear on the radio. Uh, in fact, those are the first words that Charles Foster Kane says in Citizen Kane. If you go back and watch it, the first thing that Charles Foster Kane says in a news broadcast is don't believe everything you hear on the radio, which is an obvious puckish little jibe that Orson Welles has put in there to reference the War of the Worlds
Yeah.
broadcast, which is what got him the contract in the first place. And so
And,
the whole
and I
point of
think
War of the Worlds
he
is
got that quote from Abraham Lincoln, if I remember right.
that don't Abraham Lincoln said, "Don't believe everything you hear on the
Right.
radio."
Right.
Did Abraham Lincoln have time travel technology? I think he might
I,
have.
well, that's
Um,
what's amazing about Abraham Lincoln. I can't begin to
uh,
understand it.
well, you see him at Disneyland on Main Street, just sitting there talking and, all the time.
Oh,
It's kind of amazing.
that's just AI.
And uh, so it's like everybody has already has learned that lesson. So the film ends as if everybody in the United States would see it and agree that, oh yeah, this is Disclosure Day, when in fact almost nobody would come to that conclusion. They'd be arguing about it within 2 seconds of it having been broadcast.
I think
So
that's a good point.
yeah, it ends on a kind of false. It wants to be this apotheosis of revelation, but instead it feels hollow because the filmmakers haven't taken this into account.
Yeah.
I've yet to see Backrooms. I want to, but I've been studying the phenomena of, like, little created media, uh, that surrounds the idea and the mythos. And when I saw the preview, I was like, holy shit, they made a movie out of it. Of course, someone was going to do it. Um, but I was really surprised to see they were going to make a movie out of the concept. And the basic concept is that in this kind of abandoned hauntology of malls and business parks in the American landscape, kind of this urban explorer kind of thing. Like you can go into these back rooms and lower levels, and they become this endless environment of stale, fluorescent lit
Mm-hmm.
corporate office space, basically, that goes on infinitely. So it's like this weird, Gnostic almost kind of thing, that there's some kind of false reality going on, and they found some kind of like, glitch to explore this frontier between that. But I've yet to see the movie. Is it good? Would you recommend?
I found it to be extraordinarily effective. I went into it with no expectations and was extremely impressed by it. And I can't think of it. I can think of only one other horror film where the antagonist is inanimate objects. I mean, basically, it's a horror film where the antagonist is
Yeah.
like empty rooms. There's a film from the 50s called The Monolith Monsters,
Mm-hmm.
which is all about these inanimate rocks that are not sentient, but they just keep growing and toppling over. That's it. That's all they do. They just grow, topple over, and
So they
fall.
do keep moving, I mean, there's a
They
fine
do.
line between them and Triffids if you really want to get to
That's
it.
true.
There's
That's
a
true.
slow moving threat, sort of like
Slow moving.
Romero's
Yes.
zombies. Yeah.
You're just
Yes.
worried about the rocks are just gonna fall on you. That's the whole
Right.
premise.
Yes,
That's
exactly. That is the premise. So Backrooms is, the premise. And also I would say that Obsession in a way looks backwards more as a horror film. It's drawing upon uh very old tropes,
oh
and
yeah, yeah,
updating it.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
and
yeah.
and I would say Backrooms is looking forward more in terms of you can interpret the scenario through many different lenses, through many different filters. I mean, you can
Yeah.
interpret it through a commentary on artificial intelligence. You could see it as you could even bring in ultra terrestrial interpretations into the plot. And so it's kind of multi-layered in that sense on a metaphorical level. So I was impressed by it for that reason. And also I was thinking I was reading an interview with Steve Erickson, who's probably one of the most accomplished living American novelists, whose novels are very abstract. He lives in Southern California. He wrote Rubicon Beach, Tours of the Black Lock, Arc de X, on and on. And he's not, he's kind of a writer's writer. And I was reading an interview with him where the interviewer asked him, "Can you imagine ever being like a best-selling novelist?" And Steve Erickson said, "The whole world would have to change to make my novels bestsellers. I'm never expecting that to happen." And so as I was watching Backrooms, I thought, what the hell kind of a world are we living in in which this film is like a number one film at the box office? Because it certainly does not seem, no executive who's sitting there crunching the numbers would ever think, oh yeah, this like fucking trippy existential horror film is going to be number one at the box office and crush all these like mega franchise films. I mean, nobody would
Yeah.
ever expect that.
I think it was
Uh,
already such a social media phenomenon, though,
well,
and
that's true. That's
that
that
probably
is
went into
absolutely
their.
true. And I think that studio executives will get the absolute wrong message from the film's success. Instead of looking at the film as being this skillfully made film, they're just going to think, "Oh, what else can we pull off of 4chan and turn into a film?"
I
And
think
so
I
you're
think well, yeah.
yeah, go on.
Well, I think Obsession, like, it's one of those movies that like it shows that just like, hey, people kind of like simple things. Like they don't. It's not always has to be the fucking explosions and You know, like I mean,
Drama.
it was very well done. You know, a very well executed little movie. You know, um, and people responded to it, and I think it's just showing that just like you know that occasionally I like that occasionally some films come along that like you know innovate Hollywood and be like, hey, you know, this model that you're doing really isn't working. You know, if you can make films cheap and good, why are you making these mega $1 million things? You
Yeah,
know,
and it's interesting that you have people like George Lucas, giving interviews saying you just have to sort of bend a knee to the inevitability of artificial intelligence. Meanwhile, this guy who directed Backrooms, who's in his 20s, is giving interviews saying, "Fuck AI, I have no use for it."
right?
So I think that's interesting as well. I was just my daughter just graduated from high school just a few weeks ago. So they had, the valedictorian speech. And so the valedictorian comes up and she gives a whole speech in front of this, a crowd of parents and the other 18-year-olds who are graduating. And she ends her speech with the sentence, um, and keep on hating AI. And a room full of 18-year-olds cheered, erupted into cheers at this. And I thought it was interesting because when Chat GPT first came in, my first thought was the only way to defeat this is to make this the unhippest thing in the world. It's got
Mhm.
to be like as unhip as disco in 1989. It's got it, and so I thought it was interesting that in a room full of 18-year-olds, and I have to say this is a performing arts school, so these were all artists, so maybe that makes the difference in terms of their attitude. But as T.S. Eliot said, the artist, the poet, is the antennae of the race, that sees what's coming before everybody else. So
I,
I just think it's interesting that these 18-year-olds, they're not impressed by Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and JD Vance trying to shove this technology down everybody's
oh
throat.
yeah, yeah,
Now,
yeah.
would that be like a sort of a spin on what was that movie, Cherry 2000 or something, where the guy has like his ultimate woman robot who's like the ultimate, and he hires this real human. I forget her name. Don Johnson's wife.
Melanie
Anyway,
Griffith.
yeah, hires her to find it, and then he ends up falling in love with the real life flesh and blood girl rather than the perfect uh robotic. I mean, it's all perception in life, all perception. And if people decide the fact that something is original and human is by default better than
Hmm?
anything else, the charm is there. It's all just what you decide. It's like the fact that it's flawed and that it has a singular perspective and not a holistic, perspective of the globe, homogenized. That is by definition appealing. Well, then at that point, it's doomed.
Well,
It's the
and
fact
actually,
that humanness is what makes it all start to be attractiveness to us.
and I'm actually being completely sincere when I say that I really did enjoy Lord of the Shadows. Even though it's this total. I mean, it's like an Al Adamson film, but without the naked women. Is how
Yeah,
I would describe.
yeah,
So
and
you
not just
needed
high
more naked
standards.
women, Mike. You needed more naked
Although
women in your movies.
one difference from Al Adamson is that I only made one script for one more movie and one story, and I did it storyboard by storyboard. He took 6 or 7 different movies that were unrelated and unfinished by Russians or other people, and he took them
That's
and all
true.
pasted them together with
That's true.
bikers and UFOs and Nazis, and he made a way to make a movie out of it. So I don't
You
have that
also
skillful ability to do that.
haven't ended up buried under your garage. That's also a good thing.
Oh
That is
yeah,
true.
that's true.
That is
Yeah.
true. Now you
By the
said
way,
being buried. That was in his bathroom, wasn't it? It was the bathroom floor. I think he was.
Oh, was he
or it was
buried
like
under the bathroom
oh
floor?
yeah,
I
it
thought.
was a sauna. It was
Yeah,
underneath the sauna.
yeah.
Yeah, there's a
He was.
documentary about his murder.
Yes,
He
yes,
was the
yeah, yeah.
Schlockmeister. Although I think Charles Nazette, if you're familiar with his work, he has the record of making the worst film in multiple genres. He made the worst army film ever made. He made, I think, the worst Western movie. But my favorite of his is called "Help Me, I'm Possessed," and that's one that you ought to catch. I think Adams watched that one with me. But Charles Nazette is he's top drawer, and he was Belgian, I believe. and I think he disappeared. He just disappeared off the earth. I was going to ask you, Robert, are you familiar with a website called Kinder Trauma?
Kinder trauma?
Kinder Trauma, yeah.
It sounds dangerous.
Well, it's been around for a very, very long time, and it's got a picture of a really seedy looking clown, and their slogan is "Your happy childhood ends here." And the premise of it was to talk about things that traumatized us when we were young. And when somebody's new that's a follower, they invite you to do your trauma session. And it's like, it's a horror to know you. And you talk about, the first movie that terrorized you, the first other whatever. And they focus on things like even commercials, uh, public interest things by the government. Like the British are notorious for these public interest things where tractors run over kids. It's most famous for the what was it, the something of hidden rivers and streams, and it's
Yes.
this
Yes.
cloaked guy that was actually Donald Pleasant's voice
Yeah.
that
It
tries
pulled
to
pulled
goad
pulled kids
kids
into the bog. Is that what you're
right
talking
into
about?
the deep
Yeah.
water where they don't
Yeah.
recover. But it's fascinating to see the writing, and they review new movies. They're older groups, so they have a perspective of 70s and on. But I think you'd be an excellent writer to do some pieces on kinder trauma, and it has a big following, and it's been around for forever. So it's not just some faddish thing. I've done a few of them. I wrote one about some area that I'd not seen them touch, which were post-apocalyptic movies, and about like the effect that The Day After had on the public, when it was live.
Sure.
And I remember
Yeah.
I had a youth group at my church on Sunday night, and instead of playing ping pong, we had our chips and dip and watched that, and you could just heard a pin drop. And I remember
Yes.
afterwards they had these discussion groups on TV of like, a concerned parent, an educator. These people would talk about how do we deal with this? How do we explain this scenario to our children and blah, blah, blah. And I remember the following night on David Letterman, he felt a civic public interest to do the same thing. And he says, we're going to have a concerned group talk about this seminal movie that has just moved everybody last night. And he had a citizens group discuss I think it was the Facts of Life Kids in Hawaii or something like that, which was actually shown alongside The Day After. So they explored the metaphysical concepts of the Facts of Life girls in Hawaii.
I
So
watched.
it became a big event. But the thing that was really cool was this thing that I found out from my boss, who grew up sort of the golden age of America. He had the Mercury astronauts in his room as a youngster, that he grew up in that age. His mother hid them in the cellar during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And he used to tell me all this stuff real live. But one day he told me about there was something on the Ed Sullivan show that they were showing, and they said, would send your kids out of the room. And, it was a family fair. It was meant for the whole family to watch Ed Sullivan. And he listened through the door, and he was so terrorized by it. It was a post-apocalyptic thing. He heard it through the door. It was all of like maybe 5 minutes, and he never forgot it as an old man in his 70s. And I found it, and it was an animated thing. I guess they got it from France or something, and I don't know why Ed Sullivan showed it, but the people who did see it, and particularly children, it absolutely terrified them because you could see animals fleeing as bombs were dropping, and people's faces were melting away, their eyes were melting out of the sockets. And this
I
was
know what you're
done
talking about.
in
I know
the
what you're
like in
talking
the
about.
50s, like in on TV. They didn't talk about this stuff then.
It was
And he
actually
showed it a
it was
second
actually
time.
Soviet. It was actually a Soviet produced thing.
Oh, was it? Okay, I
Yes.
thought it was
Yeah.
like other part of
Yeah.
Europe. But
I know what you
anyway,
yeah, I know what you're talking about.
I was reading about some of the people, and one kid who actually watched it so terrified him it turned his hair snow white, and it stayed that way for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
So, that's the kind of stuff I'll bring up on there on rare occasion. I talk about chick tracks and how that
Oh,
traumatized
sure.
a generation
Oh my
about,
God, I collected those in high
seeing
school.
what
Yeah.
demons were, and it was the forbidden fruit you would see in a public bathroom or something to be left behind. And if your mom saw you had it, particularly if you were, religious family like ours, she'd say, put that thing away, don't read that, which is means you have to read it. And so I just think you would be good to maybe do some of your writing over there. It's just a little creative writing exercise.
That sounds fascinating. So you were talking about it's not just films. It could be anything that traumatized
Anything.
you. As I see, I see.
One
If I
one
were going,
one kid was terrified by the Calgonite demon that was running through the dishwasher in the commercial.
Uh, uh,
did you? What was a film that traumatized you when you were 5 or 6 or a
Well,
kid?
I grew up in the golden age of the afternoon movie trailers. When you get home from school and movies that children should never see in the 70s, which were over the top, and they would always show right after school the trailers. I'll never forget watching the Beyond the Door, the very famous trailer for it, and seeing Juliet Mills, from Please Don't Eat the Daisies, sweet little Janet Mills, sort of like Julie Andrews kind of person. And you see her laying face down in her bed, and her kids are coming up to see her say, Mommy, are you okay, Mommy? And her head starts spinning around, on her neck, and with this demonic look, and her body starts floating up and flying down the hall while her kids are screaming. That's the kind of stuff I was exposed to. Or I remember the movie Deranged with Ed Gein, where the women are trying to run to the truck to get away, and he's chasing after them to get a hold of them with all the dead people
it wasn't
in
the
there.
actual Ed Gein. It was somebody were playing Ed Gein.
Somebody played him. It was Roberts Blossom that was an actor, but then like It's Alive, where you see this little baby crib,
Oh, the baby.
and
Yeah.
the
Oh
hand comes
yeah.
out and it's a claw.
Oh,
I mean,
oh,
these are the
Larry
little
Cohen.
little
Yeah.
zingers. These were the zingers that happen, and you're just this young kid seeing it. But I was always moved by the original movie, The Fly. Um, to
Sure.
me, it was somewhat Lovecraftian in a way, and
Absolutely. Body horror. Yeah.
I liked the second. Well, it was just gross and over the top. But the original one, there was such a pathos about the poor scientist and the desperation of him trying to undo this terrible mistake. And he was well intentioned, but there was, I mean, that was the true idea of horror, as if I cannot imagine this happening,
The
but
the
maybe it
writer
could, but maybe it could.
the writer who wrote the short story upon which The Fly is based was a French intelligence agent. So
Yeah.
perhaps he had access to stories about teleportation experiments or something. Who knows?
Yeah.
But yes, I saw The Fly on television when I was young. I was traumatized by. It's interesting when you're traumatized by something that was not intended to be
Yeah.
uh
Yeah. Right.
scary. Like I mean, I remember being frightened by the Pleasure Island sequence in Pinocchio where they're
Ah,
turned into donkeys.
yeah.
That scared me.
Yeah.
I remember being frightened by The Legend of Boggy Creek, which I saw when I was very young.
I've been trying to get Adam to watch that with me. I have a copy of it, and then one time
Oh,
we were ready, and then I couldn't find my copy. So that's the Southern fried Southern drive-in stuff that I love.
oh, they
Uh,
they they recently did a Blu-ray of it. So you should get the
yeah,
new, and by the way, in the last episode of the Two Spies Report, you mentioned that a company called TerraVision would be bringing out a Blu-ray of all three of your films. Did that happen, or
I am still wait. They have gone dark. They're still present on social media. They're still present there releasing, and when I send responses, it has disappeared, and they have all
I
my
would suggest,
originals.
are you familiar with Vinegar Syndrome, the company Vinegar Syndrome?
It's funny you mentioned, yes. And originally there was somebody that was putting something together that would come out on Vinegar Syndrome, but
Uh,
the deal was as such where I was going to end up like losing money on it. And I didn't
I
see much
see.
point in that. And that sort of got drug out. And this other thing, people put cash on the barrelhead, and these guys spun off from Vinegar Syndrome. They used to work for them.
Ah, Oh, I see.
And but they seemed like they were being much more respectful at making me at least partially privy to something. Not that I'm in it for the money or anything, but I thought it was more, I thought it would hold them more accountable, that they put money up that would hold them accountable to releasing it. Well, little did I
Sure.
know that, that's the way things go. And so I'm still working on trying to get those out on Blu-ray because they came and interviewed me for behind the scenes stories,
Yeah.
about things like that happened. But I tell you, the wonderful thing about the movie you saw was the backdrop of Yellow Springs, Ohio. One of the most amazing. I worked at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and I lived about 5 miles when I moved into an apartment as a kid right out of school, 5 miles from Yellow Springs. And it's out, you just drive through a little bit of country, and it's a place that time forgot. It's nothing like the surrounding Ohio. In fact, one of the most extreme fundamentalist schools, Cedarville, is just a few miles down the road from it. And this is like, the ultimate new age hangout. Well, it was known that for the Midwest. That's where Timothy Leary hung out, was in
That's
Lake Yellow
Robert
Springs.
Anton Wilson lived there.
Did he really? Well,
Yeah,
Ah,
yeah,
a little
yeah.
piece of trivia in there. Dave Chappelle, who I guess grew up there, his dad was a professor there at Antioch.
Yeah.
There was a movie he did that I only saw a little clip of where he took the residents of Yellow Springs and put them on a bus or something and took them, I think, to New York to watch him play. And when he gathered those people, it was in that same little quaint, little goofy gym that you see at the end of Lord of the Shadows, where I get attacked by all of them and they chase me out. If you
yeah,
remember that at the end of the movie, I
yeah.
recognize that same gym in there. But when we were doing the scene where the grown man was chasing the two children down the street with a butcher knife in hand over them, and we filmed that, and I'm trying to catch up with him in the car. I end up hitting him. We had a camera in the back seat, so nobody could tell we were filming. It was pure guerrilla filmmaking. There was no approvals of anything, so nobody knew there was filming. All there was just a grown man chasing two small children with a butcher knife down the sidewalk. And people drove by. You notice the traffic just keeps going by. Nobody noticed a thing. And probably
That's it.
only Yellow Springs could. And I chased him around the corner and I eventually hit him. And I hit him with the car and he bounces off and cars go by and nobody seems much ado about it. But
It's funny because I was actually going to ask you a question about did anyone call in a report about men with knives chasing kids down the street, but I guess not.
well, now you have the answer. But the only time we ever had the police come out is we were making a lot of racket in the front of Antioch, which is a beautiful look for the front of, Gothic thing for this. And they're all running out there chasing me, and I have those trick lights set up on the car. Um, and so police came up and they want to know what was going on. And the guy who was the main vampire guy, who was actually a deacon in the church and a professor at the Air Force Institute of Technology,
He
went
has a
over there and
wonderful
full.
Manos vibe.
Yes, he does. Yeah, like the master, exactly.
Yeah.
And he went over there and talked to them and said, "Oh yeah, we're making a movie." And they were like, "Okay, fine." And they just disappeared. But on that set, we actually had a bunch of skinheads come up. And these skinheads and a few guys in dresses. And they came up and everybody thought we were going to have a bad problem. And I said, "Hey, we're making a movie. Can y'all hold some lights for us?" And so all the skinheads joined in and just became the prop department while we had the big fight scene on the front ground. So you just have to improvise, and
Skinhead stage crew.
it's a little bit like when they made the movie The Warriors and
Oh
all
yeah.
those gangs descended and he just put them to work. And that kept them the same kind of thing, Walter Hill and me, uh, to do that. But
Why did you choose Antioch as the lair of the vampires?
did you see the building? If a
Yes.
vampire would go hang out somewhere, would that not be the building? When I first just moseyed down into Yellow Springs, when I moved there, the first thing I saw of when I started looking at the occult bookstores right there, surrounded all church country, all surround this town, all the new age metaphysical stuff and these mysterious alleyways. I started going back behind buildings, which I would never do today. Just started any door that wasn't locked when no one's around. I just started moseying around. And I immediately thought of the Dunwich Horror. And I thought, this is a town that has secrets. This is a town that doesn't show something that's going on the other side. I remember I had a friend visit me in town, and we drove out in front of the Antioch building, and there was a circle of people dancing, and they had these enormous paper mache heads on their shoulders, and we're all dancing in a circle. And he asked me what was that. I said, I think that's the town council, and just left it at that. But that stuff was routine in Yellow Springs. And so any of the stuff we
I
did
believe
just
it.
looked like another day in Yellow Springs. But it's a
Yeah.
cool place. I want to go back there and see. What I'd like to do is some of the locations we did, like there's a little bohemian restaurant there and stuff. I'd like to take them some of the tapes and say, hey, y'all want some of these? This is circa 1988.
So I was just gonna say before we end, and we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up. But
We're just
I was
getting
gonna say,
warmed up, aren't we?
yeah, I know,
Get
right?
started.
It only been 3 hours. So I was gonna say, just like your response to your thing about the day after, I recently watched this. It was a panel discussion that came on ABC, I believe, right after
Yeah.
it aired in 1983, and it was like Ted Koppel
Uh-huh.
hosting this thing, but it was like William F. Buckley, Henry Kissinger, Carl Sagan, Fritz Scowcroft, Robert McNamara, like this just this
Oh,
powerhouse, you know. And I'm just
Yeah.
thinking, would you actually see this on television now? This type of thing, like never
Now
would
we'd
you
have
see
Kid
something like
Rock,
this.
we'd
we
have
would
Yeah,
have
yeah, yeah.
elections of that caliber.
Right,
yeah.
right, right.
Maybe the guy
Um,
from Sound of Freedom, Jim Caviezel.
but in closing, uh, we'll start with you. We'll start with you, Mike. I mean, what's I guess everybody knows what's next for you and what are you doing and
I wish
what are you
they'd tell
working
me
on?
if they
Yeah,
did. Um, yeah, I mean, if you've not looked at my last book, it's still as relevant as ever. Two Masters and Two Gospels, Volume 1, The Teaching of Jesus versus the Leaven of the Pharisees in talk radio and cable news.
yeah.
Um, the world's longest subtitle. But there's a lot of historical surprise in the bulk of it. You've heard me talk about it on the show here. Uh, Adam and Sergio have been such wonderful friends to me, um, to take me a very limited capability and very limited contribution. And I always feel welcome here. And I feel welcome with Conspirinormal people. And I just want to thank everybody and thank them for putting up with Grandpa.
Well, well,
And don't
thank you,
put me in
Mike.
the corner
Yeah,
in a shawl and just, put me out
you
of
are
everybody's
the
way. I really
One of our
appreciate
main
that.
draws, Mike.
you are the spirit of Conspiranormal. That's for sure. Uh,
Yeah. That's like saying like this is a family here at Conspirinormal. It's the Manson family, but it's a
right.
family.
Yeah, right. And
But
Robert,
but but I am working on another book. But it's
okay,
going to
okay,
take me a while. I'm working on another book.
okay.
And I don't know what, I'm taking one day. I've been distracted with a lot of crap nobody be interested in hearing about. But I'm trying to get that under control so I can focus on the good stuff. So thanks for your patience. And I love to come on here and have intelligent conversation because I'll be honest with you, as I said at the beginning, and when I get away from all of the normal, it's like um, Harry Dean, what's his name, said in the Repo Man, those blankety blank
Harry
normal
Dean
people over
Stanton.
there. Yeah, those, I hate them, and the people out everywhere else, the Conspiranormal family has become what to me is normalcy. I come to be with normal people here, but it's always an intelligent conversation, and I come here to learn. And so I just want to say thank you for that. Thanks to the audience for supporting it for a very, very brief 14 years or so.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and Robert, yourself, like, what's next for you?
Let's see. I just recently published an article on the Evergreen Review called One Nation Under G, celebrating 250 years of the revolutionary spirit, which I wrote especially for the 250th anniversary of the United States. So you can find that.
Hmm.
An excerpt from Hollywood Haunts the World, which is published by Film International. It's called Cronus Devouring His Children, all about winter kills, which is an excerpt from Hollywood Haunts the World, my latest book, which is available from Head Press, the publisher, or from Amazon. Let's see, I had a novella recently published in an anthology called Becoming Nosferatu, which is an anthology inspired by silent cinema. And the novella is called The Land of Thieves and Phantoms, which was inspired by Nosferatu. And let's see, there's a book I've been working on for a long time called Imaginauts, Exploring the Outer Reaches of the Mind, which I'm almost done with. And also, I recently finished writing a kind of neo-noir novel about secret societies that's being read by a publisher right now, but I haven't heard back from them yet. And that's basically what I've got going on right now at the moment.
Okay.
We have some
Jeez.
very prolific gentlemen on the show tonight.
Yeah.
Well,
We do.
I do have I have one last question for Mike. I need to know if you still own the vampire fighting outfit from Lord of Shadows.
Yes, I do.
Okay, that's good.
The black fake leather jacket is much more tattered because it's in an attic. The broken crossbow can be repaired. Um, yeah, it's going to be interesting if I die and people go through that attic because I have, for my movie props, I have a Gideon Bible that's been turned into Mein Kampf with a swastika and lots of Nazi uniforms and Confederate flags from What Now and spacesuits and that other stuff from, Kucha Khan, the Shadow Lords, his Shadow Stone, that's up there. Laser weapons, it's all up there. So they'll put yellow tape around this house once they get up there and look at that. So yeah,
Well,
a chamber
they
floor.
buried
Eh?
they buried Bela Lugosi in his Dracula outfit. Maybe they should bury you in your vampire fighting
Wouldn't that
outfit.
be awesome? That is a great idea. I hadn't thought about that. And really, I need somebody, like his savior there. What's his name? Ed, the movie maker.
Ed Wood?
Ed Wood.
Ed Wood. I need an Ed Wood to discover me. That's what I really need.
That's what you need.
Bring me
it.
back.
That's
Yeah.
it.
I've sort of become my own Ed Wood, unfortunately.
I want to say that to let everybody know, remind people that Cumberland Con is coming up in October. Myself and Sergio will be there. We will be presenting there. And also Britt Rains, Josh McCutcheon, and Tim Banal will be there as well. So if anyone in the audience is interested in coming out to Somerset, Kentucky, October 10th and 11th, to come check this out, we'd love to have you come and experience it. So just
Little mini Strange
putting
Realities.
that out there. It's a little mini Strange Realities. But we are looking forward to doing that in October, and that's October 10th and 11th. You can find that. Just look up Cumberland Con. You can find tickets on there. So
Do they in Somerset? Do they still have the 95-cent steak dinner?
I don't know, Mike. I can't get the information on that. I need to.
It's on the main drag.
Yeah,
It was on the side.
I don't. I've been to Somerset a few times. I don't remember seeing it, so it may be gone at this point. Like
I had it. It's been a little while. It may be the 90s, but things haven't changed since then. So
yeah,
I expect the same prices.
I can tell you that.
Yeah. Hey, here's something I could ask people. I'm going to be in Rome at the end of September and dropping by Florence and Venice. So if there's
he
anything,
wants to know if there's anything to do.
if there's anything I need to look up, like weird stuff, I tried to find a tour of the P2 Lodge and that whole era. Was it the Days of Lead or whatever? And it turned out I didn't really have a nice coherent. I don't know why they don't have a tour for that, but I do have to
Or the
get a
Operation
picture in the
Gladio
Scala
tour?
Regia. Huh?
Operation Gladio tour.
Yeah. You'd think
You could at
they'd
least
do
go to
like that.
Blackfriars Bridge.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
that's in
yeah.
London. That's
Oh, that's in London?
yeah.
My P2 stuff mixed up.
Yeah,
That's kind of places where I hang
Yeah,
around.
he was dangling off the. You know,
That's right.
Yeah, I'll
was
be
in
hanging
London.
around there. But
Roberto
we're flying
Calvi.
through Heathrow, so maybe I could check that out. Got a little long layover on the way back. But anyway, I don't that I'm doing a little research for my book there inside the Vatican. but I will be. It's also an anniversary trip, so
Mike is going to infiltrate the Vatican for us.
You can get in the
Oh, good.
secret archives.
I've
Oh, yeah. Are
ordered
you going to
it.
go in the catacombs?
Actually, I'm trying to get a picture of Constantine's horse there in the Scala Regia, and they're a little sensitive about that, but it's part of my narrative of
Well,
my
you
thing.
cracked the Georgia Guidestones, so look out, Vatican
Yeah,
systems. My
I
goodness.
know. Yeah.
I'm a
Right.
Robert Langdon, internationally. So yeah, I'll probably have some big mind-blowing thing to come back with, but
Yes. There's
but
several murdered popes whose deaths you could solve while you're there.
Yeah.
yeah. I'm going to ask him when I'm there if I could see the hole in the throne where they would feel up there the parts of the to make sure they're a male.
Right.
Isn't that what they're supposed to do?
I don't know.
That is something I've heard. Yes, that it's supposedly the declaration is he has testicles and they hang well.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to ask him that in the group. I know my wife; she'll get a big kick out of that when I'm raised and asked that question. I don't know if I'll have a papal audience for that question.
don't cause any international incidents, Mike.
Oh, it's too late. That will happen.
When they checked those, Adam, did anyone ever just slice them off and yell "Jacques Desmoulins, thou art avenged"?
I don't
Ooh.
think so. As far as I know, you know
Ooh.
that. See that could be a
Something
story.
good.
You could write that story of the guy that infiltrates. You know the Templar that infiltrates
Well,
the
that
Vatican
still wouldn't be
Council.
as good as Gone with the Pope because we saw Gone with the Pope, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Duke, what was that guy's name? Duke, you know who I'm talking about, Robert?
No, Gone with the
Duke.
Pope?
Well, no, he did two movies. He was the king of Palm Springs. Duke, not Duke Slayton. What's the guy's name? Duke Mitchell. Duke Mitchell, and he was with the other guy who was the uncanny Jerry Lewis
Oh, yes.
impersonator.
They were
Yes.
they were the
Yes.
knockoff Martin and Lewis.
Right, and they
Right.
did like Meets a Bela Lugosi meets a Brooklyn Gorilla
The
or something
Brooklyn Gorilla.
That's
Yeah.
right.
like that. Patrio was
Yeah,
his name. Patrio.
I didn't know
And
he did more than that movie.
these were made himself. He made these two movies
Oh,
himself. They
I
were
These
didn't
never
know.
mafia movies, these low
well
budget mafia movies.
massacre mafia style, and I think was it Film Threat? It's one of these outfits that finds the old movies and restores them and brings them back. And what happened was when he died, his son found the canisters in the garage. And there's two complete feature-length movies that were released. And Duke Mitchell, of course, is the real stud and the star of them. And they're just massive, like gunshot. It's like what would she Godfather on steroids? But they've got a lot of charm. And you know how you were talking, you'd rather see Lord of the Shadows than these real expensive movies. This
Yeah.
movie just oozes charm, and I highly
Oh my
recommend you
God.
watch Massacre Mafia style. But the premise of Gone with the Pope, his follow-up, was that his old buddies that he used to do, I guess, crimes with, or maybe in the military, they got this scheme to kidnap the Pope and to charge every Catholic in the world 50 cents to release him. And I mean, it could happen. And they kept him on a yacht. And unfortunately, the Pope was so charming, he started winning over these practicing Catholic thugs. But it's a great
I feel
movie.
like it's a reasonable price to pay to ransom the Pope.
50 cents. Yeah, they're not greedy, you know? But anyway, Duke Mitchell, you might want to check out his two movies. And I recommend that to everybody out there. And a lot of Italian food cooking going on in it too, if I remember right.
That
All
is
right.
definitely going on the list.
I think that's the place to end it. Guys, thank you so much for being a part of this.
Oh, thank
gonna
you.
gonna try to do some more shows as time goes on. I'm just
Yeah, I think we made up for it on this one. So
yeah, definitely. We give them a 3 hour epic. So thank you guys.
When are we gonna do an all-nighter, like till dawn? Because
Oh
I'm
my
wired
God.
right now.
Yes.
I think you could do it, Mike.
I'm
I think-
Oh,
starved.
you know what
What's
we
that?
could do? You should just play Lord of the Shadows and we'll talk over it. You could do like a
Hey.
commentary on it.
Yeah.
Well, that was what I was supposed to do for these producer guys for this thing, is to have
Yeah.
the director's commentary on it, with some of the guys. That was what's the plan were. But yeah, I could definitely talk about what was going on behind the scenes and the camera and things like that. And that's a lot better than what you see on the
We
screen.
could just do like a Zoom Doctor Future movie night.
I
Yeah.
think the one online only Strange Realities had like an after party hangout that was about 8 hours,
Yeah.
and people were falling asleep and still on camera, and yeah,
Yeah. Well, that's what happened to my listeners during the regular Future Quake episodes, just the regular episode that happened. But, in the original Future Quake, the first co-host, Emmett, he would fall asleep and he was a co-host on camera, and you could hear the snoozing in the microphone, which was not a real ringing endorsement to me, of the riveting nature of the show I produced when your co-host is snoring in the microphone. I hope you all have not done that to each other on here.
yeah, might have once or twice. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Luke did used to take a nap whenever he was on the show. He would always
Very
nap.
occasionally.
He'd always be asleep.
Well, I'm sure he did that at work too, so it wasn't really an offense.
All right, gentlemen. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, but thank you all for hanging out with us. And we'll see
Thank
you on the
you.
next episode, guys.
Salmonella.
Bye.